I wasn't looking for work when the offer came. I was bouncing between odd jobs. Roofing, warehouse shifts, little construction here and there. But the truth is, I cared more about chasing adrenaline than chasing steady pay. I've always been that way. Cliffs, towers, bridges. If it was high and dangerous, I wanted to climb it. That's probably how he found me. I'd posted a video online a couple months back. Me free climbing an old water tower outside town. No ropes, no harness, just bare hands on rusted steel. Got passed around, got a few thousand views, then vanished. Pulled down for safety violations. So when a man slid into the booth across from me at the diner one night, I knew right away he wasn't there by accident. He was tall. Too tall for his frame. Thin as a scarecrow. Dressed in a loose charcoal suit that didn't seem to fit. His skin was pale, the kind of pale that makes you think of the morgue. His cheeks were sunken, lips bloodless, his eyes flat, watery gray, not a spark in him. And when he smiled, it didn't look like a man smiling. It looked like someone baring teeth. "You're Paul, aren't you?" he asked. I hesitated. "Yeah, who's asking?" He extended a hand, and against every instinct I took it. It was like grabbing a corpse. Cold, clammy, no strength in the grip. "I'm from Mortis Communications," he began. "We're expanding service. We need climbers. Good ones. And you..." His voice flickered. "You like climbing." "Oh yeah? How would you know that?" I replied. The grin widened a little. "We saw you climb." From inside his coat, he pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. My name was written on the front, in thin, shaky block letters. Inside, a contract, a glossy flyer with a cell tower stabbing into the sky, and a check, an advance, enough to make me stare. "Hazard pay," he began. "It's not for everyone, but I think it's exactly what you're looking for." I should have walked, but I wasn't afraid of the climb. That's the thing. Heights don't rattle me. I'd scaled cliffs without ropes, towers without permits, bridges with nothing but chalk on my hands. I had dangled hundreds of feet in the air and laughed with the wind in my teeth. If this pale weirdo thought a little danger was going to send me running, he didn't know me. What did get under my skin wasn't the climb. It was him. The way his hand felt like death in mine. The way his voice didn't rise or fall like he was reading lines. The way Mortis Communications sounded like it belonged carved on a headstone instead of a business card. But the check was real, paper was thick, the ink fresh, and the number on it was more than I had made in months. So I signed. The contract was short, weirdly so. No clauses about safety procedures. No HR boilerplate, just a date, a location, and a start time. At the bottom, a line for my name. When I slid the paper back across, he stood in one fluid motion, towering over the booth. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Just turned and drifted toward the door, the bell jingling weakly as he pushed into the night. And then I was alone, staring at the envelope and the money that was going to pay my rent for the next 3 months. The next morning, I drove. The address led me miles outside town, down dirt roads that turned rougher the further I went. No landmarks, no houses, just flat fields and sky. By the time I spotted the tower, the road had narrowed to little more than gravel and weeds. And there it was. Steel. Straight up. It punched into the clouds like a spear. So tall, my neck hurt trying to look up. It seemed way higher than it should have been. But hell, I was up for it. I parked my truck at the base. There wasn't much else there, just a chain link fence with a gate wide open, and a little concrete pad with a locked utility shed. Nobody around. No foreman, no co-workers, no safety briefing, thank God. Just me and the tower. I tightened the strap on my helmet, clipped my harness to the first rung, and set my boots against the steel. This was it. Left hand, right hand, one rung at a time, and the climb began. At first it was easy. The steel was cool under my gloves, the harness clipped in tight at my hip. The rhythm of it set in quick. Grab, step, pull. Every few feet I stopped to hook my lanyard higher, then kept going. 50 feet up, the truck was already shrinking behind me. As I went up, the world started flattening out, the fields turning into a patchwork quilt, roads thinning to faint lines. I grinned through the sweat. This was what I lived for. By 100 feet, the wind had picked up. Not enough to throw me, but just enough to remind me how exposed I was. It whistled around the tower's frame, tugging at my jacket, making the steel groan now and then when I shifted my weight. 200 feet. That's when I saw the vest. It was caught on one of the crossbars, a bright orange safety vest, faded from the sun. It hung limp, one strap shredded like it had been ripped. For a second, thought maybe another worker had left it there, but the way it flapped in the wind, stiff and stained at the edges, didn't look recent. I kept moving. Another 100 feet up, and there was a helmet wedged between the rungs. White, cracked down the side, the chin strap dangling. No logo, no name. Just sitting there like someone had dropped it on the way down and it got stuck. I unclipped, shifted my lanyard higher, and climbed past it. My gloves brushed it by accident, and the plastic felt brittle, like it would crumble if I squeezed. Weird, yeah, but accidents happened. Gear got lost. Maybe somebody had gotten careless. And me, I wasn't stopping. The higher I went, the quieter everything below seemed to get. My breathing filled my ears, rough and steady. My arms ached, my thighs trembled, but it felt good. Every pull brought me closer to the top. 500 feet. The truck was the size of a toy now. The horizon stretched forever, flat and empty in every direction. My chest hurt a little from the effort, but I wasn't slowing down. This was why I signed up, the danger, the height, the view. Weird vest, broken helmet, whatever. I kept climbing. 1,000 feet. Most people would have been crying in their harnesses by now, but me? I was steady. Boots locked to the rungs, gloves biting down, breath even. This is what I came for. 1,200. My truck looked like a speck of dust on the dirt road. The fields were just colors now, the horizon blurred by distance. The wind was harsher up here, colder, but I kept moving. Hand, foot, pull. 1,500. Every muscle burned, but not in a weak way. In that good way. The way you feel after a fight or a climb, you're winning. I muttered under my breath, grinning to myself. Come on, higher. 1,800. The ladder just kept going. I forgot towers even got this tall. My lungs were working harder. The air a little thinner than I liked, but that wasn't slowing down. 2,000. Finally. The rungs ended, and a small platform waited at the top, barely enough for me to stand on. I hauled myself up, boots scraping steel, and straightened. My chest heaved, the wind tearing at my jacket. And that's when I saw it. In the center of the platform was a shallow iron basin, blackened around the edges, like something had been burning there. Empty now, but scorched and waiting. The steel beneath it was stained, warped from heat. And nailed right into the rail beside it was a sheet of paper. The corners fluttered in the wind. The edges were stiff and crusted, and smeared across the surface, dried to a dark red, was something that looked an awful lot like blood. The handwriting was jagged, like it had been scratched in with a shaking hand. At the very top, scrawled larger than the rest, were the words, "Hello, Paul. If you follow these rules and complete your task, your debt of $119,427 will be paid." I froze. My name. And that number. Just a few nights ago, I'd sat at my kitchen table with a stack of crumpled notes, IOUs, credit slips. I'd added everything up. The gambling losses, the money I'd borrowed, the cards I'd maxed out. And that was the exact number I'd landed on. $119,427. It was exact. Nobody could know that. Not my mom, not my sister, not my boss at the warehouse. No one knew this. Except, apparently, Mortis. My hands shook, the paper rattling in the wind. They hadn't just hired me to climb. They knew me. I lowered the page and glanced down to steady myself. But my stomach dropped, because the entire tower was gone. All of it. Every rung, every beam, every bolt. Vanished. There was nothing below me, no ladder stretching back into the earth, no patchwork fields, no dirt road, no truck. Just a flat, endless void, dark and shifting like a storm. The only thing left was the small platform under my boots, floating somehow, alone, 2,000 feet above nothing. My breath caught. I gripped the railing until my knuckles ached, the paper snapping in the wind beside me. The steel bit into my palms through the gloves, slicking sweat. I pressed down harder, half expecting to feel the tower shudder beneath me. But there was nothing. The wind screamed past my ears, colder than it had been a moment ago, sharp enough to sting. My stomach rolled like I'd stepped off a ledge, and I had to lock my knees to keep from swaying. I forced myself to look again. Just darkness beneath me, stretching forever, like the earth itself had been carved away. The platform wasn't wide, maybe 4 feet across, maybe. Barely enough room to plant both boots shoulder width. One wrong step, one slip, and I'd be gone. I was stranded on a metal plate, floating in nothing, 2,000 feet in the air, with nowhere to go. The paper rattled in my grip. I forced myself to look at it again. Beneath that cold greeting, more lines waited. Rules for the climber. Number 1. Brush away the ash at your feet. When you uncover the symbol, trace it with the chalk hidden under the basin. Number 2. Prick your palm and smear a drop of blood across the traced mark. Number 3. Insert the key into the hole beneath the basin and turn it to ignite the fire. Number 4. Speak the words, "Malgrim, come forth." Number 5. Keep the key in your pocket. Do not give it to anyone And number 6, descend the ladder with the key. Do not look back. I read the list twice, my mouth going dry. The basin sat in the center of the platform, scorched but empty, like it'd been used before. I crouched, gloved fingers brushing the metal at my feet. It felt gritty, dusty. I swept it aside. Beneath the soot, faint lines glimmered. A sigil burned into the steel, thin and jagged. The first rule. I hesitated. The void below hummed. Maybe it was just the wind. Then I reached under the basin. My fingers closed on something smooth. A stub of white chalk. And slowly, carefully, I began to trace the symbol. It was a pentagram. As the chalk squealed across the metal, the air seemed to shift. The edges of the platform flickered, and below me, a single rung of ladder just shimmered into existence, glowing faintly against the darkness. I stopped, heart hammering. This wasn't just a checklist. It was working. I crouched lower, staring at the faint rung that now glowed below me. Looked real enough. Solid steel. But I wasn't about to trust it yet. The second rule burned in my head. Prick your palm and smear a drop of blood across the traced mark. I slid my glove off and searched the platform. My fingers brushed something wedged in the seam near the basin. A tiny little knife with what looked like a gold handle. Whoever left this hadn't left anything to chance. I pressed the blade against my palm and pulled quick, just enough to sting. A thin line opened, and a bead of blood welled up fast. I clenched my fist and let it fall under the chalked sigil. The drop hit the lines, then spread fast, sinking in like the metal itself was thirsty. The platform jolted beneath me. My eyes snapped down as the void rippled and bent. Steel screamed back into place. Not a few rungs this time, but whole sections of ladders and beams slamming into existence like they'd been hidden just out of sight. The structure stretched downward for what looked like hundreds of feet, before the darkness swallowed it again. I gripped the railing, chest heaving. Piece by piece, the tower was coming back, and I was the one bringing it. What the hell's going on? I muttered. My voice cracked, the wind tearing it away as soon as it left my mouth. My pulse thudded in my ears, and for a second I thought my knees might give out. None of this made sense. Chalk, blood, glowing rungs, steel just appearing. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted off. I jammed my glove back on, the inside slick with my own blood, and I forced my eyes back to the list. Insert the key into the hole beneath the basin and turn it to ignite the fire. The third rule. I crouched and ran my fingers along the warped steel. There, just beneath the basin, was a narrow black slot, and beside it, waiting like it'd been left just for me, was a brass key. It was cold, heavier than it should have been. My hand shook it as I slid it into the hole and turned. The basin exploded with light. A blue flame surged upward, steady, painting the whole platform in its glow. It didn't flicker, didn't waver, just burned tall and silent, as if nothing could touch it. Below me, the void rippled. More of the tower slammed back into existence. Ladder, beams, crossbars, stretching downward for hundreds of feet before vanishing again. I staggered back, the heat prickling my face, the key still hot in my hand. I shoved it deep into my pocket and gripped it tight. I wasn't thinking about rituals or symbols or what any of this meant anymore. I just wanted down. The fire hissed beside me, blue light washing across the paper. I forced my eyes down to the next line. Speak the words. Malgrim come forth. I crouched, brushing ash and soot off the steel lip of the basin. Malgrim. The word crawled in my head before I even opened my mouth. Malgrim, I started, then stopped cold. My throat locked. Wait. The chalk, the blood, the fire, the tower rebuilding piece by piece. And now this, saying that name, not just a name, a command. Come forth. My fingers clutched the paper so hard it nearly tore. And I understood then that this was all much bigger than me just getting down. It was a ritual. And if I finished those words, I wasn't just climbing out of here. I was calling something in. I lowered the paper, eyes darting to the edge of the platform. The ladder stretched below me, steel rungs and beams further than before. Hundreds of feet, maybe more. For a second, I let myself hope. Maybe it went all the way down. Maybe the climb was back. Maybe I could start down right now and be done with this. But I knew better. Even from here, I could see where it ended, fading into the black, cut short, like someone had erased the rest with a stroke of ink. And past that, the ground, faint at first, like a watercolor bleeding through paper, the world began to take shape again. The dirt road, the fields. It was all there, hazy but real, waiting at the bottom. It shouldn't have been possible, yet the ground slid into my vision, swaying faintly, as though gravity and the world itself had bent, just to show me how far I still had to go. To get back down, I had to finish the sentence. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know what came when I did. I thought about my debts, about the number on the paper, about the way it matched exactly. Yeah, I wanted it gone. All of it. The calls, the threats, the shame. But right now, standing on a plate of steel floating above nothing, I didn't care about money. I just wanted down. I just wanted the hell out of here. The fire hissed beside me, hot and cold at the same time. My fingers tightened on the paper. There was no other way. I decided I'd do it. I'd finish the rules, get the ladder back, climb down. Then I'd run, call a priest, 2 priests, the army, the government, everybody. Tell them what Mortis was doing up here. Somehow I knew that this was really bad. Could feel it in my bones. But I told myself I would finish this up and get help. I swore I would. Better me than some other guy, right? Some other climber who unleashed whatever the hell this is and just never even told anybody. I knew I was bullshitting myself. But I made the decision. I opened my mouth and spoke. Malgrim. The sound left my lips like a stone dropped into water. It echoed in a way it shouldn't have, carried off by the wind. The blue flame hissed higher for a heartbeat. I clenched the paper tighter, knuckles white. My throat was dry. This was it. I drew in a slow breath, Come forth. The platform started to vibrate. The flame bent toward me. And then the rumbling began. It rolled out slow at first. A distant growl. So loud I felt it in my ribs before I heard it. The sound grew deeper and heavier, until it was like the earth itself was cracking open. I gripped the rail harder, eyes straining into the dark. The black wasn't empty anymore. In the distance, the earth itself seemed to shift and churn. Vast shapes moved against the dark, too far to make out, but massive enough that I could see them from here. The fire hissed higher, its blue light stretching across the platform. My pulse hammered as the rumbling continued, rolling back and forth like thunder. Something had heard me. I leaned over the rail, squinting down. The ladder stretched farther now. Not just a few sections, but long, endless lengths of steel. The path downward had grown. I turned back to the paper, the blood-red letters shivering in the blue light. Number 5. Keep the key in your pocket. Do not give it to anyone. I slid a hand into my pocket, feeling the weight of the brass pressing against me. I gulped. Then my eyes dropped to the last line. Number 6. Descend the ladder with the key. Do not look back. I didn't wait. I didn't think. I gripped the rail one last time and swung onto the ladder. The steel burned cold under my gloves, but it was solid. The weight of it thrummed through my arms like it'd been waiting for me. I started down, hand, foot, drop. The wind ripped harder here, cutting across the steel. Twice my boot slipped, the rung slick with frost, and both times my stomach lurched. My harness clipped, my hands squeezed, my whole body jerking tight, and I kept going. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just down. Shapes moved on the horizon. At first, they looked like hills rising. But they weren't hills. They crawled. Vast limbs heaved themselves up and out of the ground, dragging bodies the size of mountains. Horned silhouettes twisted into the sky, glowing faintly with fire. Their heads turned slow, like they were sniffing the air, searching. My jaw locked. My breath stuttered in my chest. What have I done? I clung to the ladder, staring at those towering monstrosities. But I kept climbing down. Hand, foot, drop. Faster now. The rungs rattled under my boots. And then I saw them. The other direction. Not dark shapes rising from the pit, but bright ones, burning white and gold against the darkness. At first I thought it was lightning. And then wings unfurled, huge and blinding, beating soundlessly as the figures streaked toward me. These things were endless fire and blinding light, shapes too sharp to look at. They weren't human. They weren't anything close to human. But whatever they were, I was even more terrified of these things than the demons clawing out of the earth. The air shook as they crossed the void, their light scattering sparks across the steel. I jammed my eyes shut, clinging to the ladder, scrambling down rung after rung. Faster, faster. I didn't care about my grip anymore. Didn't care if my boots skidded. I needed the ground. I needed off this ladder.
The tower rattled around me, steel groaning like it wanted to collapse. My breath tore ragged from my chest, each exhale hot inside my helmet. Down, just down. The rungs blurred under my boots, clanging in frantic rhythm. My blood dripped from my cut palm, leaving streaks along the steel. And then, Earth? Not far now. I could see it, rising up like salvation. I shoved myself harder, arms and legs burning, lungs on fire, nearly falling twice more as the ladder swayed. The light was closing behind me. The fire, the wings, the soundless roar that shook the sky. Almost there, almost there.
No, stop.
The voice boomed against the steel and seemed to echo all around me. The light behind me grew brighter, hot against the back of my neck. I squeezed my eyes shut. I didn't want to see it. My chest hitched. The rungs trembled under my grip. And for some reason, the voice, maybe the light, I started thinking about my life. Not the good parts. The bad ones. Women, drugs, wasted years. All the wrong things I knew were wrong even when I did them. Every stupid bed, every lie I told. Every time I turned away from somebody who needed me. It all came rushing back. I pressed my forehead against the rung, eyes closed shut, trying to block it out. Please, I whispered. Please don't. I knew what it was then. It'd been a long time ago now, but I'd been raised in the church. I remembered that feeling of confession, kneeling in that dark little booth, whispering sins through a screen, while a voice waited on the other side. That feeling of guilt, shame, fear of judgment. This was that, but times a million. And I didn't need to open my eyes to know. Every part of me understood what was behind me. It was an angel. Not the kind on prayer cards. Not the gentle ones from stained glass. This was something vast and blazing. Wings like burning iron. Presence so heavy, it pushed against my skull. It carried judgment on its breath. I had never been so terrified in all my life. The light behind me was blinding, hot enough to sting my back through my jacket. Paul, the voice said again. Not shouting this time, but low and heavy, like the whole sky was speaking. I kept my eyes shut. The rungs trembled under my hands, my breath shuddering out of me. And then, like a switch flipping, I knew I could just step off right now. The ladder was only feet from the ground. If I let go, if I dropped, everything would stop. The angel would vanish. The tower would vanish. This nightmare would fold up and be gone. I didn't know how I knew, but I did. One step off. That was all. But then what? Behind me, the light pressed closer. And in the distance, I could still see them. The vast shapes I'd stirred, crawling upward out of the black. If I stepped off, the angel would disappear. The tower would disappear. But the evil wouldn't. I knew that somehow. It would still be there, awake now, moving. And if I let go, who would stop it? I pressed my forehead to the rung. I wanted down. God, I wanted down. But I also knew, in some deep, awful way, that what I'd done had summoned something much bigger than me, and that running wouldn't undo it. The voice spoke again, closer now.
Give me the key, son.
The words rolled through me like thunder. My grip faltered. The presence pressed against my back. I couldn't take it. The judgment, the weight, the blinding invisible light pouring through me like it was seeing down to my bones. It was too hot. It was just too hot. I wanted down. My forehead pressed to the cold steel, tears coming out.
It's okay.
The voice said again, softer now, and the ladder itself hummed with a sound.
Give me the key. I cannot take it from you.
I clutched my pocket. The wind roared. The blue fire hissed somewhere above. And all I could do was freeze, caught between the ground and the voice. I wanted down. God, I wanted down so badly. The ground was so close now, I could smell the damp earth, feel the promise of it under my boots. I could let go. I could just let go, and this blinding thing behind me would be gone, would just disappear. This weight pressing down on me would be gone. Every instinct screamed at me to turn away. But I didn't. Not this time. I pulled it from my pocket, and I held out the key. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The ladder creaked under my weight. The blue fire hissed far above, and the light pressed against my eyelids. Then the presence moved. I didn't open my eyes, but I felt it. The shift of air, the warmth folding closer. And then a hand, cool and steady, closing over mine. It didn't snatch, it didn't tear. It simply slid the key from my palm, the way an adult would take something from a child. The heat ebbed. The weight lifted. I forced my eyes open just enough to see a shape rising in front of me. Wings of light, vast and silent, folding once, twice. The figure nodded slowly, like it was proud of me. And then it rose, straight up, a column of blinding radiance shooting skyward. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the steel shifted. The rung jerked under my grip, and before I could catch myself, it gave way. I hit the ground hard, my knees buckling, the back of my head cracking against dirt, and the world went dark. When I opened my eyes, it was night. The air was still. Crickets hummed somewhere far off. A faint breeze carried the smell of dust and grass. I sat up slowly, groaning. My gloves were filthy, my jacket torn. But the tower was gone. No steel rising into the clouds. No basin, no fire. Nothing but open fields under a pale moon. The dirt road stretched empty beside me. My truck sat there, quiet and ordinary, like nothing at all had happened. I staggered to my feet, my pockets empty. No key, nothing. No demons crawling in the distance. No titans clawing their way out of the void. No bright shapes streaking across the sky. No angels. Just a flat, empty field under a dead quiet night. My truck sat where I'd left it, headlights dark, windshield glinting with moonlight. The grass whispered in the breeze, like it'd all been a dream. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the horizon for anything. A scorch mark, a glint of metal, a single rung jutting from the ground. Nothing. Not even footprints. The tower was gone. All of it. I walked toward the truck on stiff legs, every step heavy. The driver's side door creaked when I pulled it open. I slid into the seat, staring at the wheel, trying to catch my breath. Was it real? Had I just imagined 2,000 feet of steel, the basin, the fire, the angel? I gripped the wheel. My chest heaved, my head ached, and that's when I saw it. Sitting dead center on the hood, pressed flat against the metal by the night breeze, an old piece of paper. My breath caught. I got out slowly. My hand shook as I reached for it. The paper was stiff, edges curled, faintly stained with blood. I knew what it said. I'd read it before. I folded it once, slipped it into my pocket. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I needed to know it was real. Proof I wasn't insane. Proof I hadn't dreamt anything. I got back in the truck, shut the door, and turned the key. The engine rattled alive. Headlights cut across the empty field. I drove home through the darkness, along the same dirt road I'd come in on. And strangely, I felt peace.
Hey everyone, Steven here. I hope you enjoyed the story. In case you haven't watched it yet, just so you know, the full Daggerland series is on the channel. It's about 4.5 hours, and I think you'll really like it. So if you haven't finished the Daggerland series and you'd like something to do, check it out. I will try to put a video link on screen. Also, check out our new Daggerland merch at hauntedstuff.com. There's a link in the description. Thank you for listening and all the support, and I hope you have a great weekend.
The first time I heard someone mention a 2026 bunker, I was standing in line at a coffee shop. Two men were ahead of me at the counter. Both wore black suits and sunglasses. They looked like something out of Men in Black. "We'll need the updated spec to be ready," one of them said. The other nodded. They spoke the way people do when they're talking about construction schedules or delivery windows. I took my coffee and left. Not one to fraternize with the competition. I design underground structures for a living. I don't pour concrete or operate heavy equipment. At least I don't anymore. I sit at a desk and draw things that other people build. Rooms, corridors, reinforcement layouts, mechanical systems, access points, and it's technical work, precise work. People imagine bunkers as dramatic places. Thick steel doors, warning lights, something that looks military. In reality, most of them look like basements that keep expanding. And for a long time, that's all they were. Storm shelters, safe rooms, panic rooms. People wanted a place to go during fires, tornadoes, break-ins. Somewhere solid, somewhere quiet. Then the projects started changing. Around the same time, stories about wealthy people building underground started appearing more often. The most visible example is Mark Zuckerberg. Public reporting showed that his property in Hawaii included a large private compound with an underground component connected to it. Planning documents referenced reinforced concrete, controlled access points, and independent systems. When reporters asked about it, he described it as a storm shelter. Just being prepared, he said. And most people accepted that and moved on. In my line of work, no one did. Because the scale of that project, it wasn't subtle. It wasn't the kind of thing you add as an afterthought. But Zuckerberg wasn't the only one. Sam Altman has talked publicly about preparing for worst-case scenarios. In interviews, he's mentioned having a reinforced basement and personal contingency plans. He hasn't framed it as fear. He's framed it as planning. Jeff Bezos doesn't talk about it much at all, but reporting around his properties has described estates designed for isolation, privacy, and self-sufficiency. The language, it's always very careful. Secure, private, hardened. Nobody ever says the word bunker. And then there are the cases that don't make headlines. I've heard stories from contractors and consultants about wealthy buyers purchasing large parcels of land in remote areas. Not vacation homes, not ranches, just land. In New Zealand, there have been publicly documented cases of foreign buyers attempting to build underground structures under agricultural or storage permits. From the surface, the properties looked ordinary. Underground, the plans were extensive. In the Midwest, former government missile silos were sold decades ago. Some were converted into private underground residences. You can look it up, it's true. One widely reported example was rebuilt into a multi-level structure with thick concrete walls, internal power systems, water storage, and controlled access between floors. Public coverage focused on luxury features. The engineering documents focused on survivability. In Europe, there are underground residences built into hillsides and mountains, marketed quietly to private buyers. They're described as secure homes. The layouts resemble high-end residences. The supporting systems are complex and redundant. I have worked on projects like these. At first, the jobs were familiar. Storm shelters, reinforced basements, rooms hidden behind false walls. Clients always had a reason ready. Fires, unrest, natural disasters, pandemics. The reasons didn't affect the drawings. Over time, the requests changed. The rooms went deeper. The walls got thicker. The budgets stopped being discussed. Clients stopped asking how long construction would take and started asking when it would be finished. By then, I was working for a specialty firm. They didn't advertise. You found them through referrals. Their portfolio was fences, gates, hardened structures, and buildings designed to keep people out. They brought me in as a consultant. Drafting and review work, nothing sensitive, they said. The first project I handled for them was labeled a secure storage unit. It had redundant power, filtered air, and a sealed internal room with no windows. The second project followed the same layout. The third did too. Different states, different climates, different clients. The similarities were noticeable. Terminology shifted as well. Clients stopped calling them shelters. They called them units. Unit A, lower unit, core unit, service unit. The firm adopted the language without comment. Dates started appearing in internal documents. Operational readiness. Post-2026 access limitations. 2026 rated systems. When I asked what that meant, I was told it was part of a new standard. Nobody explained exactly what that standard was. I kept working. In this field, you're paid to draw what's requested and make sure it meets requirements. Context isn't necessary to do the job. And then one night, a revised set of drawings came through. They were marked urgent, redlined, highlighted. The basic structure hadn't changed, but several systems had been adjusted. Routes altered, layers added, components swapped out. A single note was attached. Apply updates to all 2026 builds. Do not discuss changes unless asked. There was no signature. And after that, I started comparing projects more carefully. Different firms, similar layouts and timelines. Certain features appeared more often, others disappeared. When I asked questions, the answers were still vague or deflected. When I asked one client what he planned to store in a sealed internal room, he said it was equipment. When I asked what kind, he said it wasn't something I needed to know. I started reviewing older plans. Early projects looked simpler. Newer ones included additional systems, additional contingencies, and layers. Nothing in the documents explained why. That was consistent. But I build what I'm asked to build. And more, what I'm being asked to design looks less like a precaution and more like an expectation. The call came when I was in the back of my truck, digging for a tape measure I dropped behind a stack of rolled plans. My phone buzzed twice. Unknown number, Ohio. I answered with my shoulder pressed to the doorframe. "Yeah, hello," I said. A man's voice came through, clean and flat. "Is this Daniel?" "Yeah, it's Daniel," I replied. "My name is Martin Hale," he began. "I was given your name by a colleague. I have a private underground structure on a property south of Cleveland. I want an inspection. Systems, integrity, readiness. Are you available this week?" "Yeah, well, I can be," I began. "How big we talking?" "Large," Hale began. "You come highly recommended. I'd like you to look at it yourself." "All right, well, you got any plans you can send over?" "You'll get everything on site," Hale said. "When you arrive, you'll be met, you'll be escorted, you'll have full access." He gave me an address and a time. 2 days later, 9 in the morning. And the call ended. I stood there with a tape measure in my hand, looking at the screen like it might explain what just happened. I wrote the address down anyway. And 2 days later, I left North Olmsted before 7. I took 71 south and then cut over on smaller roads the way he told me. I passed the usual warehouses, gas stations, diner signs, and then nothing but flat fields and bare trees. There was a point where my GPS showed a blue dot moving through a grid of roads with no name, just numbers. The address got me to a stretch of 2-lane highway with no shoulder. There was no sign, no gate, just a gravel entrance that looked like it belonged to a farmer. I turned in. The drive-in was long, not winding, just long. Straight gravel with a shallow ditch on either side. The property opened up around me as I went. More acres than I could see from the road. Trimmed grass, mowed lines, trees spaced on purpose. I saw the house after a minute. Modern, not huge, but expensive in a quiet way. No decorative stone, no columns, nothing that said mansion. I parked near a detached garage, and a man was waiting by the front steps. Suit jacket, white shirt, no tie, hands in front of him like he'd been standing there longer than necessary. He walked down to meet me. "Daniel," he said. "Yeah, that's me." Martin Hale shook my hand once and let go. "Thank you for coming. I appreciate you making the drive." Yeah, no problem," I said. "Well, you said this was an inspection. You want me to treat it like a commissioning walkthrough?" "Yes," Hale said. "We want confirmation that what was built matches what was specified. We want confirmation the systems perform as intended. This way." Inside, the place was quiet and cold. No TV, no music, no smell of food or cooking, no shoes by the door. Nothing on the walls besides one landscape photo that could have been bought in a hotel lobby. Hale didn't offer coffee or water. Didn't ask about my drive. He walked me down a hall and opened a door that looked like a closet. Behind it was a stairwell. The stairs were concrete, wide enough for 2 men side by side. A handrail bolted cleanly into the wall. Recessed lights every 10 feet. Everything sealed, painted, finished. No exposed edges. No rough work. Hale stepped down first. "It's a long way," he said.
Yeah, how far?
"You'll see." I followed. The stairwell didn't go straight down. It ran in long segments, turning on landings. Each landing was the same size, the same angle, the same light placement. It was built for traffic, not a panic tunnel or hatch escape. A real passage people could use daily. After the first minute, the sound of the house was gone. No HVAC hum from above. No floor creaks. Just our steps and the soft noise of air moving behind the walls. I glanced up once and couldn't see the door anymore. We kept going. The air got colder, drier. Smelled like concrete and new plastic. Filtered air, it's always got that clean, dead smell, like an office building after hours. I checked my watch without thinking. We'd been walking down for 3 minutes. Hale didn't slow. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a corridor with a ceiling higher than the one upstairs. The walls were concrete, but faced with panels. Smooth, white, industrial, but finished. The floor was polished, not shiny marble, just sealed concrete done properly. The corridor ran straight for a long distance, with doors along one side, each door marked with a simple label. Unit A, Service, Mech 1. I stopped just inside and let my eyes move over the space. "This is bigger than I expected," I said. Hale nodded. "That's why you're here." I pulled my notebook out, started doing what I always do. "All right, power first. Where's your primary intake and transfer?" Hale pointed down the corridor. "This way." We walked past 2 doors and into a room that sounded alive. Fans, low vibration, a steady mechanical presence that you feel through the soles of your shoes. The room held 2 generators on mounts, both enclosed with sound dampening. Fuel lines ran cleanly. A bank of batteries sat along the far wall, tied into inverters, and a panel that looked like it belonged in a hospital. I looked at the labels. I looked at the redundancy. "All right, 2 gens," I said, "and this battery bank is not a backup. This is a second system." "Yes," Hale said. "All right, fuel storage." Hale led me to an adjacent room. Tanks. Not a couple drums. Tanks designed to sit there for years. "Filtered intake?" "Yes." "Manual start?" "Yes." I wrote it down. I moved to the electrical panels. Everything was labeled by zone. Nothing sloppy. No handwritten tape. The work was professional and expensive. "This looks like a commercial install," I said. "It was." "Who did it?" I asked. "Oh, a firm that understands discretion." I didn't push that. Next, I checked air. Hale took me into an air handling room that was clean enough to eat off the floor. Pre-filters, HEPA, a section labeled with chemical filtration, spare filters stored in sealed packaging, a bypass system that could route around 1 unit if it went down. "How many intakes?" 4. "Where are they?" "On the property. Protected." "Can I see them?" "Not today." I wrote that down too. Water came next. Storage tanks, treatment, plumbing that was oversized, redundancy in pumps, a UV treatment unit, replacement parts in labeled bins like a maintenance shop. This is set up for a long occupancy, I said. Hale nodded again. How many people is it designed for? Enough, he replied. I didn't argue with that. I kept moving. The layout kept opening up. There were corridors that branched into living quarters, not just bunks, actual rooms. Beds, desks, storage, bathrooms that weren't cramped. A kitchen with commercial-grade equipment. A pantry room larger than my first apartment. There was a medical room with sealed cabinets, a table, oxygen and refrigeration units. There was a communications room with hardwired lines, a rack and shielding in the walls. I ran my hand along the paneling and felt how thick it was. Faraday, I asked. Yes, Hale replied. I wrote it down. We passed doors labeled Core Access and Lower Unit. The farther we went, the more the place felt like a facility, not a shelter. The ceiling stayed high. The lighting stayed even. The ventilation was balanced. No hot spots, no stale corners. It was well done. Everything about it said it wasn't built for a single storm night. It was built for routine. I checked fire suppression, I checked drainage, I checked the seals around doors. I looked for weak points and found none. At one point I stopped and looked at Hale. How long has this been in use? I asked. It's been tested, he replied. By who? I asked. He didn't answer. He checked his watch and looked back down the corridor. I have something to take care of upstairs, he began. I'll leave you to finish your inspection. He reached into his jacket and handed me a thin access card. All doors you'll need are active, he said. Take your time. I'll come back down when you're done. I nodded. Hale turned and walked away toward the stairwell. His footsteps carried for a while, and then blended into the background noise of the bunker. I stood there for a moment, completely alone in this massive underground space. I continued the inspection the way I normally would. I moved through the remaining corridors, checking door seals, wall thickness, where mechanical cutaways exposed it, and drainage points along the floor. Everything matched the standard of the rest of the structure. The workmanship was consistent. No rushed sections, no retrofits. Several rooms were clearly meant for daily use. Laundry machines bolted into reinforced pads. Storage shelving labeled but empty. A food prep area sized for routine operation rather than emergency rations. I made notes as I went. The lower unit extended farther than I expected. The corridor narrowed slightly, then widened again near the end. The lighting changed in this section. The fixtures were recessed deeper into the ceiling, producing a softer light. At the end of the corridor was a single room. The door was open. Inside, the space was larger than the others and mostly empty. Shelving lined one wall. A work table stood against another. In the center of the room was a low metal podium anchored to the floor. A book rested on top of it. I stopped just inside the doorway. The book didn't match anything else in the room. Wasn't stored or protected. Wasn't labeled. It was just there. I walked toward it. The book was resting flat on the podium, already open to the middle. The pages lay evenly, as if it had been placed that way on purpose. I reached out and touched the edge of the page. The paper was dense, thicker than modern stuff. The edges were uneven and cut by hand. The binding was pale and smooth, pulled tight around the spine. On the front of the book was a skull shape formed as part of the cover itself. It wasn't attached or decorative. I leaned closer and looked at it. The pages were filled with dense text arranged in narrow columns. Diagrams were embedded between blocks of writing, drawn with straight lines and precise spacing. The symbols repeated throughout the page in consistent patterns. Then I noticed the illustrations. They showed figures that didn't resemble human anatomy. Others had horned heads or distorted faces. The drawings were detailed and deliberate, not stylized or abstract. At the top of the page, there was a large number, 2026. I read it again to be sure. The number did not look like it was added later. It was part of the page layout, aligned with the text beneath it. After that, I stopped thinking about the rest of the bunker. I focused on the book. I studied the diagrams, then the figures, then the symbols repeating along the margins. The layout looked structured, like instructions meant to be followed in order. I didn't turn the page yet. I kept my hand resting on the edge of the podium, and I stayed where I was. Finally, I slid my fingers under the cover of the page and turned it. The next pages held only a short block of text. It read, "When ancient vows are cast aside and signs return across the sky, the sealed will rise, the count is tied to 26 when men must die." Below the text was a full-page illustration. A man knelt on bare ground, his knees pressed into the earth. His hands were planted in front of him, fingers spread, weight leaning forward. His head was tilted up. High above him, far into the sky, an angel hovered. It was turned completely away from the man. The wings were extended wide, filling most of the space above, their scale making the figure below look tiny by comparison. The man remained where he was, looking up. The angel remained turned away from him, positioned as if already moving on, with nothing in the illustration suggesting it would turn back. I didn't turn another page. 2026. Finally, I flipped the page. The next one was filled with water. Not the surface, the depth. The ocean was drawn in cross-section, cut straight down from sky to black. Light thinned quickly as the water descended. The upper layers were pale and open. Below that, the lines grew heavier, the shading denser, until the lower third of the page became solid darkness. Something occupied the center of it. The scale was established by comparison. Ships were drawn along the surface line, reduced to narrow silhouettes. One vessel was split open, its hull folding inward. Another was angled downward, stern lifted as if caught by something below. Beneath them, a massive body coiled through the water. It was enormous. Its form bent slowly across the page, thick and armored, each curve overlapping the next. Ridges ran along its length like layered plates. The head rose from the darkness beneath. It was broad and blunt, shaped like a wedge. The mouth opened vertically, split from lower jaw to crown, and inside were rows of short, dense teeth packed tightly together. A single eye was visible on the side of the head, set far back. It was round and pale, fixed forward. The body vanished into the black below, extending beyond the page. And I turned to the next. The water was gone. The next pages showed the sky. The background was left open and empty. No clouds, no stars. Suspended within it were spheres, perfectly round. Some were small, others larger. Each one was drawn cleanly, smooth-edged, evenly curved. Several were shaded a bright blue. One illustration showed the inside of an aircraft cockpit. The windshield framed a blue sphere hovering just ahead of the nose. It was close enough to fill much of the view, glowing evenly. Another showed the same sphere pacing alongside a wing, holding position without drift. More pages followed. Spheres over open water, above farmland, hovering near coastlines. Several illustrations showed a blue sphere descending straight down into the ocean. The surface remained smooth. The water closed behind it without disturbance. As I flipped through the pages, the images stayed consistent. I thought of pilots interviewed recently on the news, describing objects that matched speed, then just stopped. Footage released quietly. Reports of glowing blue orbs entering and leaving the ocean. The drawings in the book, they matched those accounts very closely. I turned the page. The next section moved underground. The pages showed cross-sections of earth and concrete, layers peeled back to reveal underground structures. Walls, ceilings, rebar, and sealed rooms were drawn in precise detail. Outside those structures were figures. They stood taller than the entrances, measured across doors and access hatches, 10 feet or more. Their bodies were made entirely of bone. Each structure was fused and rigid. Skull shapes were elongated and smooth. Eye sockets were deep. Rib cages curved inward, forming solid frames around the torso. Long arms ended in fused fingers shaped into rigid claws. Several illustrations showed the figures positioned directly against bunker walls. In one, a clawed hand pressed flat against reinforced concrete. In another, a figure leaned close to a sealed door, its skull tilted, as if trying to find a way in. One image showed multiple figures surrounding a buried structure, hovering just above the ground. Wings extended outward and upward. The wings were constructed with interlocking bone segments, it looked like, wide and stiff. Another illustration showed one of the figures gripping a human above ground, lifting it upward. The bunker below remained intact and sealed. None of the images showed the figures inside. Every drawing placed them at the perimeter, against walls and above access points, at entrances that remained closed. I turned the page. There was a massive coiled serpent. Its body was thick and muscular, each loop overlapping the next. Large, smooth scales covered its length. The head was triangular and blunt. Eyes were set forward and wide, shaded a bright red. The mouth was open. Inside, the throat widened quickly, drawn deep and smooth. One illustration showed a human figure halfway inside, legs still visible, arms pinned tight by the coils. Another showed a second figure fully swallowed, the body outlined inside the serpent as it moved downward. The final image showed the serpent alone. Its midsection was thicker. The red eyes stared outward at me. I turned the page. The next section began without illustration. A single word was written at the top, centered and plain. Survival. Beneath it was a short rhyme, set apart from the rest of the text. Keep gold close when the sky turns red. It buys you time. It buys the dead. Silver shines for blood and bone. If you strike alone. I read it once and stayed where I was. Gold to bargain, silver to kill. I thought about the price charts I'd seen lately. The ones that kept showing up whether I looked for them or not. Gold climbing steadily. Silver moving harder, faster, spiking in ways it hadn't in years. The explanations were always the same. Inflation, debt, central banks, market fear. Those reasons had always been enough before. A few days earlier, a video had started playing while I was working. Somebody talking about gold and silver again. He'd been saying the same thing for years, but this time he was right. He was talking about physical metal, about shortages. I remembered scrolling past it without much thought. But standing there looking at that page, I wondered how many people out there knew what was coming. I thought about the bunkers I'd worked on, the ones that went deeper every year, the ones with storage rooms left empty on purpose, shelving waiting to be filled with something specific. I thought about how the clients had stopped asking why and started asking how soon. Was this why prices were climbing the way they were? Not because of debt ceilings or inflation, but because a small number of people knew there was something much worse coming. Okay, enough. I closed the book and let it rest on the podium. The room didn't change. The bunker was the same as before. Nothing in the concrete or steel reacted to what I just read. Because as convincing as the pages had been, as precise as the drawings were, this was still a book. Just some weird book. Wasn't evidence, wasn't data, it wasn't proof. People had written convincing things before, prophecies, predictions, end-of-the-world timelines. They never came true. We're still here. This was ridiculous. It had to be. A book couldn't explain markets, couldn't explain military sightings or ocean footage or why people with money were suddenly building downward instead of outward. It couldn't explain why the images, why they felt so specific. I told myself it wasn't real, it was just a book. It couldn't be real. But even as I stood there, part of me resisted the thought. Not because I believed it, but because something about it felt different. The pages didn't feel written to convince anyone. They felt written to record something. I shook my head slightly, and I turned away from the podium. "You've read it?" The voice came from behind me. I turned. The man in the suit stood a few steps away, hands folded in front of him, the same way he'd been when I arrived. "Oh, yeah, look, I'm sorry, it was open and—" "No," he interrupted. "It's all right." He didn't sound upset or surprised. "I wanted you to." He looked past me at the podium, then back at my face. "You've seen what's coming." "You mean the story?" I began. "The book? Yeah, I read a few pages. It's creepy, but..." I gestured back toward the podium. "It's a book," I continued. That's all it is." He didn't interrupt me, didn't raise his voice. He just waited until I stopped talking. "Come with me," he began. "I want to show you something." He turned before I could answer. We didn't take the main corridors. He led me through a service passage I hadn't checked yet, narrower than the others, the ceiling lower, the lighting spaced further apart. We went down another set of stairs. This level wasn't finished the same way as the rest of the bunker. The walls were raw concrete, no panels or paint. The floor was bare. The sound of our steps carried farther. At the end of the corridor was a single door. It was steel and reinforced. A small window set into it at eye level, covered by very heavy glass. He stopped beside it. "I'm going to open the shutter," he said. "I wouldn't look for long." He slid a panel aside. Something was behind the glass. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. My brain tried to classify it and failed. Whatever was in that cell didn't move toward the window. It didn't react to us. That made it worse. My chest tightened and my mouth went dry. I felt my hands curl without meaning to. Every instinct I had told me to step back. I did. That's enough. He slid the panel closed immediately. And we stood there in silence for a moment. I didn't ask what it was. I didn't ask how it got here. I didn't want answers that would stay with me. We went back the way we'd come. When we reached the finished levels again, the bunker felt almost normal by comparison. He stopped near the podium. I brought you here because I'm not good with things like these. Power, air, water, redundancy. That isn't my expertise. He reached into his jacket and removed 2 objects. Tickets. They were rigid, covered in gold foil that caught the light as he moved them. There was no writing on them except the number 2026. He held them out in his open palm. You and one other. Choose carefully. He let that sit. You can stay here, keep the systems running, maintain everything, make sure it works the way it's supposed to, he said. He stepped past me and walked back toward the stairwell without saying another word. His footsteps faded the same way they had earlier. And then I left. The walk back up felt longer than the way down. The stairwell didn't change. Everything felt the same, but different. When I got outside, my truck was where I'd parked it. I got in, shut the door, and started the engine. I didn't look back at the house as I pulled onto the gravel drive. I didn't slow when I reached the road. I followed the same route back the way I'd come, past fields and tree lines and long stretches with nothing on either side. I drove without turning on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I didn't say a word. And that brings us to the present moment. I'm telling you this because I've made my decision. I've accepted his offer. I'm taking my son, Julian, 8 years old. Last night after dinner, I sat down with him on the couch and I pulled one of his books off the shelf, one of the older ones, a picture book with monsters in it. The kind where the creature is always somewhere in the background of the page, half hidden behind furniture or trees, while the story pretends it isn't there. I told him I was going to read it. He leaned against me and watched the pictures while I did. Didn't say anything. Just followed along, turning his head when I turned the pages. When we reached the part where the monsters filled most of the frame, I closed the book instead of finishing it. I told him we were going to be leaving soon. Somewhere different. He looked up at the book, then at me. Where are we going, Dad? Where we'll be safe from monsters, I said. I told him it was a place built to keep people safe. Deep underground. I kept my voice even. I told him he could bring whatever he wanted that fit in one bag. He nodded once, stood up, and went to his room. I heard drawers opening. I heard the zipper on his backpack. When he came back, it was half full, clothes folded wrong, his monster book tucked inside it. I told him we'd leave in the morning, and he went back to bed. After he fell asleep, I stood in the doorway and watched him. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself that this was what fathers were supposed to do. The truck is fueled and ready. We'll be leaving soon. I didn't plan to say anything. That was the easiest option. Get in the truck and just drive away. Let the rest of the world figure things out on its own. But I couldn't live with that. I couldn't leave knowing I'd seen what I'd seen and said nothing. Knowing I'd been warned in a way most people were not. So this is me warning you. I know times are hard. I know money is tight and friends are harder to come by than they used to be. Talk to the people around you. Your friends, your neighbors, the ones you trust. Band together if you can. Organize. Make a plan that doesn't rely on everything working the way it always has. Pick one place to go. Think about food, about shelter. Think about how you'll protect each other if it comes to that. Don't assume someone else will handle it. And if you're able, get gold or silver, even a single coin. It wasn't framed as advice in the book. It was framed as survival. I don't know exactly how any of it works, and I don't think explanations matter much right now. But maybe preparation will. I have seen the things that are coming. Do what you can. Just do what you can. And get ready. Hey, this is Steven. I just wanted to say thank you for all the support in 2025. I hope 2026 is a great year for all of us and that we're not eaten by demons. Good night. My name is Jesse, and I do weird jobs for money. That is the cleanest way I know how to put it. The internet would tell you it's called urban exploration or haunted tourism, though it's a lot more than that. People hire me when they don't want to call the cops or can't call anyone else. When a landlord needs someone to spend a night in a haunted Tokyo apartment to prove it's been spiritually cleansed. Yeah, that's me. When a backyard grave starts sinking a little too fast after a quiet funeral, and the family needs someone to sit out there overnight just in case the soul gets restless. That's me too. I get these jobs from message boards, private DMs, Craigslist sometimes. I've walked into houses with blood dried on the ceiling. I've documented basements that were still chained shut from the inside. I've stayed in motels where the clerk gave me 2 keys just in case the one they left behind doesn't work. People say you can't live off this kind of work. And they're right, in the normal sense. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have a car newer than a decade ago. But I've got food, gas, a place to park, and a roof over my head when I need one. It's an unstable but exciting life. Forced minimalism, one would say. Now my specialty is locations. Places no one wants to go, but can't leave alone. Murder houses, abandoned gas stations, when a guy saw lights in the sky back in '84 and never came home. Tunnels with no blueprints, barns with padlocks on the inside, and lakes that were never on the map to begin with. The kind of spots where, if you say the right name in a diner 5 towns over, someone will drop their fork and say, "No one goes there anymore." That's where I go. I have a small blog that is weirdly active. I post under the name fieldmanual_07 on Reddit. If you've seen it, you already know what I do. If you haven't, don't bother unless you're ready to lose a few nights of sleep. My audience is small but loyal. They're the kind of people who read every police report and still ask what didn't get filed. They send me tips too. Sometimes, the really good jobs start in my inbox with just a screenshot and the words, "You'll like this one." I didn't get into this line of work to upload YouTube videos. Good thing too, since I barely know how a camera works. I have the small blog and that's about it. I've just always loved strange, unexplainable things. Been that way since I was a kid. Always drawn to the things other people tiptoe around. If a teacher said, "Don't open that door," I'd have it halfway open before they finished the sentence. I used to think I'd grow out of it. Turns out you grow into it. Which, surprise, surprise, my parents did not like one bit. And my biggest supporter is my dog. Man's best friend and certainly mine. His name is Barney. Barney's been with me for most of my life. I got him when I was a kid, back when my entire world was school, Saturday morning TV, and whatever stray thought drifted through my head. He was a small rescue puppy then, all oversized paws and sharp little teeth, and I named him after the first show I saw on Nickelodeon that afternoon. My parents said I could have done much worse. I guess they just felt relieved I didn't name the dog SpongeBob. That actually would have been a good name. He grew fast. Some kind of shepherd mix, according to the vet, with the sort of build that makes people think twice before stepping too close. But he's gentle, loyal in that old-fashioned way, where he checks on you every few minutes to confirm the world hasn't changed while his back was turned. When I started doing the work, documenting strange buildings, spending nights in places that still had police tape on the floor, Barney came with me. Not because I wanted to bring a dog into danger, but because he refused to stay behind. If I packed a bag, he sat on it. If I stepped out of the house, he ran after me. Eventually, I stopped trying to convince him to stay with my parents, and I take him everywhere I go now. I trained him as best I could. Not for attack work, nothing like that. I needed him to sniff things out, to alert me if something wasn't normal, to stick close and stay calm. He wears a purple bandana around his neck, mostly because it makes people smile and assume he's friendlier than he looks. But the truth is, he's my partner. He listens better than most humans I've worked with. He notices details I miss, and he never asks why we're driving out to the middle of nowhere. Most of my jobs take me far from city streets. I go where people don't want to look. Abandoned houses, empty service stations, forgotten motels with locked doors that have no keys. Some clients, they want proof that a building is safe enough to sell. Others want someone to walk through a location that scares them, even when they don't want to admit it. This one time, a landlord in Tokyo paid me to spend a night in an apartment that was supposed to be clean after a priest performed rites. My task was simple: stay until sunrise, record anything unusual, and confirm nothing followed me out. People worry about strange things, and I've learned not to laugh at any of it. Every place has a reason someone wants answers. Sometimes it's a rumor, sometimes it's real history. Old mining towns are common requests. Settlements built on bad land or rushed construction tend to have stories attached. Structures collapse. People go missing. When someone tells me a town is half buried in dust and the locals refuse to step within a mile of it, I know where that's probably where my next job is. Another type of call comes from the Cold War leftovers. Bunkers, research stations, storage facilities with sealed steel doors. Many of them were supposed to stay locked forever, yet somehow they do not. Someone breaks in. Someone reports lights where there shouldn't be lights. Someone else wants proof that whatever opened that door didn't break anything important. They hire me to camp inside, explore the place, and record every detail. The job I'm on now is one of those. A mining settlement with a long list of missing people and a bunker not too far from it that recently woke up after decades of silence. I don't know yet if the two things are connected, but someone out there thinks they might be. That's why they paid me. They want eyes on both. Before I go any further, I should explain something. I don't walk into these jobs blind. I've been doing this long enough to know that if you treat this kind of work like a joke, or worse, like it's a thrill ride, you will not be doing it for very long. You'll end up missing, hurt, or talked about in the kind of forum posts that start with, "Anybody ever hear what happened to that guy?" I'm still here because I follow my rules. I wrote them down when I was younger, after the first few jobs that didn't go as planned. They weren't clean rules at first, more like rough ideas, the kind of notes you scribble on paper scraps in the middle of the night. But over time, they got sharper. I saw what happened when I broke them, even a little, and I decided I was not going to test them again. There are 4 of them. I don't take a job unless I know I can follow all four. If I can't, I walk away, no matter how good the money looks. And if you want to get into this type of field, you better listen close. So here they are. Let's start with rule number 1. Now, before I get into the details of the first rule, I want to explain why the rules matter so much. They are practical steps that keep me grounded when I walk into places where most people would not take a single step. Following them keeps my work simple. They also give me something steady to rely on when everything else feels unpredictable. With that in mind, the first rule grew out of real mistakes, a few scares, and advice I picked up long before I knew this would become my job. Rule 1. Obtain permission whenever possible. If not possible, apologize later. This rule has two sides. One is legal, and the other is the part that everyone likes to laugh at. Now, most abandoned places aren't actually free to explore. They look empty, but that doesn't mean they don't belong to someone. Buildings rot, roofs fall in, fences collapse, but the deed still exists somewhere. A company might own it, even if they forgot about it. A private owner might have inherited it and never bothered to fix anything. A city might hold the title because taxes weren't paid. Either way, walking in without permission is trespassing, and trespassing can lead to fines or getting arrested. I learned that early. Back when I first started, I assumed abandoned meant nobody cares. Turns out, plenty of people care when they see someone wandering around a structure that is technically theirs. So now I research ownership every time. I look through public records, old business filings, county databases. If I can find the owner, I contact them. I explain who I am and what I do. It sounds strange, but a lot of owners appreciate someone taking interest in their forgotten property. Some even ask for my footage afterward. Others say no, and in that case, I walk away if the line looks too clear. I pick my battles. Getting handcuffed in front of a collapsing house is not great for business. But the other side of this rule, it's not about the law anymore. It's about respect, or maybe habit. It comes from my family. My grandpa was the most superstitious person I have ever met. He grew up in rural Hungary, and he took all the culture with him when his family left for America. He treated every forest trail, broken shed, an empty field like something was already living there, and had been living there long before humans showed up. He never stepped into a space without announcing himself. He would say his name out loud, explain his purpose, and wait a moment before crossing the threshold. He taught me to do the same. When I was young, I thought it was just one of his quirks. He had a lot of them. He believed the Fae liked honey more than anything, and they stayed in forgotten places because they preferred quiet over noise. He said abandoned buildings were perfect for them because nobody bothered them there. He told me, if you're going into someone else's home, even if you can't see them, you should let them know. It sounded odd, but he said it with such seriousness that I never questioned him at the time. As I got older and started walking into my own strange places, his advice came back to me. So before I enter any site, I follow his old routine. I stand at the entrance and say my name. I explain why I'm there and what I intend to do. I ask to come in and give it a moment, even if I know I won't be getting any answers. Then I step inside. I do this even when I know the only thing in there is dust and old wood. I do it when I know the building has been empty for decades. I do it even when other people are with me, and they roll their eyes or make comments under their breath. I also bring a small offering. I carry tiny honey jars in my pack for this reason. Nothing fancy, just enough to leave behind at the doorway or on a windowsill. My grandpa used to say honey was a sign of goodwill. They notice intentions, he'd say. Give something sweet when you enter, and you won't be chased out. Now, I didn't believe him literally, But I still bring the jars. They're small, easy to pack, and they feel like a connection to someone who taught me how to look at the world differently. People do make fun of me for it. Other urban explorers, documentary teams, amateur, thrill seekers, they all react the same way. They think it's cute or strange or unnecessary. They laugh when I talk to an empty space, and they laugh harder when I leave a honey jar behind like I'm feeding invisible wildlife. But you know what? I have noticed something they never do. They trip. They twist ankles. They fall through the freaking floor sometimes. They lose their balance on stairwells. They get sick from breathing in dust. They end up in the ER with cuts, sprains, and worse. Me? I come out clean, man. No broken bones, no hospital visits. I don't even have a paper cut. Now maybe it's just dumb luck. Maybe following my grandpa's rule keeps me slow and careful, which keeps me safe. I don't have a fancy explanation for it. But what I do know is simple. When I follow this rule, things go fine. When people ignore it, things go very wrong. Barney and I have had to rescue a few idiots who fell through the floor once or twice. So remember, permission is not always available. Ownership gets murky. Records vanish. Sometimes no one alive even remembers the place you're trying to explore. In those cases, I follow the second half of the rule. Apologize later. If someone shows up angry, I explain myself plainly. I show my research and I offer to leave. I give them space to cool off. Most people respond well when you stay calm. This rule protects more than just my body, it protects the work. It keeps the process steady and predictable, even when the environment is anything but. It reminds me that I'm stepping into someone else's story, not dragging mine into theirs. It keeps me grounded. And that's why Rule 1 always comes first. You never know whose home you're stepping into out there. So be on your best visitor behavior, and you should be fine. Rule 2 is simple. Take nothing but photos, leave nothing but footprints. Most people think it means don't be an idiot, which is true. It's something you hear early in this line of work. You see it scrawled on message boards, tagged on rusted water tanks, stenciled on the backs of old explorer jackets. For most people, it's just a slogan, a reminder not to be a jerk. Don't break windows, tag walls, or leave any of your trash behind. And most of all, don't take anything. I learned it because I watched what happened to someone who ignored it. That someone was Danny. Now, Danny used to work with me sometimes. I wasn't a close friend, but we got along well enough to meet up for jobs when our schedules lined up. He had a growing YouTube channel about abandoned places, and he talked a lot about turning it into a full-time job. He had energy and ideas, and he moved quickly through every place we entered. I liked him, even if I didn't share his pace. Barney liked him too. My dog is usually cautious with strangers, but he warmed up to Danny right away. On shoots, Barney would trail after him, sniffing whatever Danny pointed out, tail wagging whenever Danny stopped long enough to give him a pat. It made our work lighter to have someone my dog trusted. We met in an abandoned hospital one afternoon. The building was 3 stories tall and mostly empty inside, with long hallways and peeling paint. I remember the sky was a dull gray. Barney walked ahead of us, checking the rooms before we stepped inside, but he always circled back to stay near my leg. The anatomy wing was on the top floor. Most of the cabinets had been opened years earlier, their contents scattered or stolen, but a few shelves still held old equipment. Danny found the skull on the back shelf. It rested there, like someone had placed it down during a normal day, and never returned to finish the task. He picked it up with both hands, and started explaining to his camera what it might be worth. Barney stopped walking. He lowered his head and backed up until his tail brushed my knee. He didn't bark or growl, but he watched Danny with a level of tension I'd never seen in him before. Danny laughed. He loved the camera, but he loved the idea of making an impression even more. He turned the skull toward the window, angling it so the light hit across the very top. "This is gonna do crazy numbers, man. Imagine the thumbnail," he said. I told him to leave it, but Danny brushed me off. Said it wasn't a grave. Said it was abandoned twice over, and that someone online would pay a fortune for it. He tucked it into his pack. Well, we parted ways in the parking lot. Barney jumped into the back seat of my truck without waiting for me to open the door all the way. I watched Danny walk back towards his car with a backpack slung over one shoulder, the camera still hanging from his neck. And that was the last time I saw him alive. A few months passed. I moved on to other jobs. And then on a Monday morning, I got a call from the police department in the same town where the hospital was. They asked if I knew a man named Daniel Reyes, and if I could come in to answer a few questions. They found Danny on the hospital roof. Not inside. On top, floating in the old water tower tub that had been dry for decades. His shoes were placed neatly at the bottom of the ladder, as if he'd taken his time to line them up before climbing. There were no signs that he'd slipped, nor was there any alcohol or drugs in his system. His lungs were clear. There were no bruises on his arms or shoulders, and his hands didn't show any sign that he had tried to fight for air. But his right ear had been torn off. That was the phrase written in the report. Torn off. The coroner said that it was odd to have a wound so violent and yet have no signs of struggle anywhere else on the body. They searched the roof and the ground around the building and never found the missing ear. The detective told me they were classifying it as an international drowning caused by psychological distress. They found a note in his jacket pocket that they believed explained everything. The note was short. The handwriting was shaky and tilted, the way it looks when a hand can't stop shaking. Danny wrote that something had been following him for weeks. He said it had 3 eyes, 3 arms, and 3 feet. He said it stood behind him when he slept and waited for him to notice. He wrote that it didn't speak, but he could feel it breathing against him, and that it knew him now. Those were his last words. The detective called it psychosis brought on by an erratic lifestyle. The lawyers called it an unfortunate accident. Everyone agreed it was tragic, and that was the end of the file. I didn't argue. There was nothing I could have said that would have changed how they filed the paperwork. I just nodded, signed my statement, and left. Barney was quiet for a long time after that. When we went on jobs, he stayed close, and he checked every doorway before letting me through. He paused more often than before, especially in places that felt old or wrong. I started trusting his judgment more than my own. Dogs don't explain things, but they don't lie either. Whatever happened to Danny had left a mark on both of us, even if neither of us had been there to see it. And now I don't touch anything I don't need to. I don't have souvenirs, even small ones. I don't move objects for better camera angles. I don't pocket keys or photos or papers to look at later. When Barney hesitates, we turn around. If he refuses to step forward, we leave. People online talk about Danny's death sometimes. They call it strange. They argue about the details. Some say the story doesn't make sense, that the missing ear was an exaggeration or a lie. Others say the note was a forgery. It had become one of those unexplainable mysteries. And to this day, it's unsolved. Rule 3 is never go in alone. People hear that and think it's about teamwork or safety or being prepared for accidents. And they're right in part. Abandoned places aren't kind. Floors rot from the inside out, ceilings give without warning, and one wrong step can turn a good day into a rescue call that never comes. But that's not why the rule exists. Not entirely. It's about having someone or something to keep you aware. Someone who can look where you can't, listen when you are distracted, or tell you when you've stayed too long. In my case, that someone is Barney. We've been doing this together since before I started taking jobs for money. He's trained to pick up things I miss. Movement, sense, changes in temperature, anything unusual. He gives me confidence in places that would otherwise feel too still. And when I talk to him, it keeps me grounded. It's easy to forget how strange a place can sound when you're alone, but talking out loud makes it manageable. Most explorers don't have that. They prefer going solo. Some do it for the challenge. Others do it because it feels braver that way, like proof of authenticity for their followers online. It's good content. A single flashlight beam moving through a dark hallway gets better clicks than two people joking about camera angles. I see their posts sometimes. Footage of half-collapsed schools, burned houses, factories, asylums. They walk in with headlamps and GoPros strapped to their chest, narrating as if their audience is right behind them. It looks cinematic until you realize that one wrong board could give way under their weight. Then it stops looking brave and it looks stupid. When I first started, I thought those people were reckless. Now I just think they're young. I remember being that kind of young too, thinking the rules were flexible, that caution was optional, that the bad things only happen to other people. But you learn or you don't. Barney is my ears when the wind picks up, my eyes when the light fades. And sometimes he's the only reason I know when to leave. A single sound from him, a growl or a whine, or even the way he stops walking, is enough for me to trust that we're done. Still, not everyone follows the rule. This one night, I found myself at a bar near the edge of town, kind of place where there's locals and travelers. I'd finished a job that afternoon, a simple inspection gig for a warehouse that hadn't been opened in like 30 years, and I wanted something warm to eat that didn't come out of a can. Barney sat on the floor by my legs, head down and snoring peacefully. The place was half full. A few regulars leaned over their drinks, and a group of tourists filled the corner booth. Their jackets were covered in dust, and their camera bags sat piled beside the table. I didn't need to ask what they did. I could tell. Urban explorers always recognize their own. Made sense, I thought. It was the season for it. There were always more of us gathered around during the summer. Well, I sat at the bar, ordered a meal, and listened to a group of people who more or less invited me to join them and chat. The group started talking about a story they'd heard while hiking earlier that day. It was a local legend. Something about a mountain north of town where a man had gone missing years ago. According to them, he hadn't gone missing alone. He'd been climbing with a friend, got caught in a blizzard, and the friend never came back. When they finally found the man, he wasn't the same. The group's tone shifted when they reached that part. They lowered their voices, but still spoke loud enough for me to catch the words. They said the man had eaten his companion to survive. They said the land was cursed, and that when rescue finally came, what they found wasn't a man anymore, but something else. One of them said it had 3 eyes, 3 arms, and 3 feet. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. The explorers laughed it off after a while. They said people still saw it near the woods sometimes, that it watched hikers from the ridgeline or followed anyone who whistled after dark. They called it a local myth, one of those stories every small town has to keep kids from wandering too far. They joke that they might go looking for it tomorrow for exclusive footage, The bartender rolled his eyes, and he told them that kind of talk was bad luck. He said the locals don't go near that mountain, not even during the day. When they noticed me, one of them asked if I believed in the story. I told them no, but asked them where they'd heard about it. The tallest one said it came from a ranger they'd met at a gas station. I finished my meal, paid my tab, and stepped outside. Barney stood up when he saw me, wagging his tail. The night air felt still, and across the street, the woods formed a dark shape against the edge of town. As we walked back to the motel, I kept thinking about that legend, the man who had eaten his friend, the blizzard, and the curse. I had heard similar stories before, but not with details that matched Danny's description so precisely. 3 arms, 3 eyes, 3 feet. Barney brushed against my leg, and I looked down at him. He glanced up at me once, then kept walking, nose to the ground. He didn't seem bothered. "Yeah, don't worry, boy, we're not doing anything stupid," I said as I scratched him. I told myself it was just another story. Every place has one. Every explorer hears dozens. But still, when we reached the room, I double-checked the locks and made sure my gear was packed. Barney settled by the door like he always does. I sat on the bed and wrote down everything I'd heard. The details, the names, the description. I didn't know what to call it yet, coincidence or warning, but it didn't matter. I'd learned that ignoring patterns in this line of work led to trouble. Months passed before I heard of the same monster again. That brings me to rule 4. Always do recon. Yeah, this one sounds boring, I know. It's not dramatic like the other rules. But honestly, this is the one that saved me the most. I tell people all the time, don't get excited until you've seen it in person. Unless I'm sure that something is going to be a slam dunk, which is rare, I plan a recon trip. It's like scouting a campsite before spending the night there. You don't just show up in the dark and hope for the best. I try to do this as early as possible, because there's nothing worse than spending hours researching a cool abandoned site, hyping it up to your friends, driving 90 miles out of state, and then realize you're staring at an empty dirt lot. That exact thing happened to me once. I'd been planning for weeks to visit an old brick factory just outside Columbus. I had maps, drone shots, photos from a forum. I even convinced a friend to tag along. We get there, and all that's left is a parking lot. A brand new one. Turns out the whole place had been torn down just a month earlier. That trip cost me gas, lunch, and a good mood. But it also taught me something important. You can't trust the internet. Photos go out of date fast. 1 year can mean the difference between a haunting, half-collapsed structure, and a clean stretch of pavement. So I started scouting every site in person before making a plan. Sometimes that means driving out early in the morning and walking the perimeter. Sometimes it means talking to a neighbor or someone at a nearby business, anything to make sure it's still there. But recon isn't just about checking if something's there. It's about making sure it's safe enough to enter. A lot of newcomers don't get that. They find an address on some message board, read an article or two, and think that's enough. They don't check the floors. They don't check the structure. They don't test for soft ground or weak ceilings. And that's how people get trapped, or worse. The internet doesn't tell you when the floorboards have given out, or when the lower levels have flooded. I once heard about a pair of explorers who followed a set of old directions into an abandoned theater. The main floor had collapsed years ago, but no one had updated the post they used. Well, they fell straight through and had to be pulled out 12 hours later. One of them broke both legs. And that's why I do recon. Every single time. The last time I ignored my own rule, I ended up pulling someone else out of a mess. It started with a message on my blog from a teenager named Nathan. He said he'd found a site a few towns over, a former office complex that had been shuttered since the 90s, and wanted to know if I'd checked it out. I hadn't. Wasn't on my list. But something in his message told me he wasn't asking just out of curiosity. He mentioned weird noises and a bad feeling. Well, I drove out there that afternoon, and the building was exactly the kind you expect to find in the middle of nowhere. It was plain, square, gray, half the windows broken. A small fence circled the perimeter, but half of it had been flattened by a fallen tree. Barney hopped out of the truck and started sniffing along the fence line. When I called Nathan's number, I heard it ring from inside. And that's when I knew he hadn't just been visiting, he'd gone in. I found him about 20 minutes later. Part of the ceiling had collapsed in one of the hallways, trapping him in a corner between two steel beams. He was terrified, but thankfully unhurt. Dust covered his jacket, and his flashlight had gone out. Couldn't have been more than 16, this kid. "All right, don't move, I'll get you out," I said. The collapse wasn't severe. A large metal support beam had fallen across the doorway, but I could see a small gap near the top. All I needed was leverage. I went back outside to grab my crowbar, and when I returned, Barney was lying near the entrance, ears twitching. He wasn't barking, but he was watching something deeper in the hall. I didn't see anything at first. The building was silent except for the sound of Nathan. And then I heard a scrape. A slow dragging. I crouched down beside Nathan and I put a finger to my lips. He nodded. And through the gap in the debris, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was another explorer. The shape was wrong, though. Its back was hunched in a way that looked painful. It stepped into the light spilling from the window, and I saw it clearly. 3 eyes, all set in a line across the face. 3 arms, long and bent in strange directions. 3 legs that didn't quite move right. And the worst part was that it had 2 heads, conjoined at the shoulders, splitting apart at the torso, like something that had once been one and had decided to separate halfway through. It was dragging a deer carcass by one arm. The body was half-eaten, ribs exposed. It left a dark trail behind as it walked. Nathan's eyes widened, but I slapped my hand over his mouth before he could breathe a single sound. Barney stayed silent. The creature stopped near the end of the hallway, tilted one of its heads, and sniffed the air. And then it kept moving until it disappeared around the corner. I waited another full minute before I spoke. "Okay, we stay quiet, and we're leaving." I wedged the crowbar under the fallen beam and pushed very carefully. It took both hands and most of my weight, but the metal shifted just enough for Nathan to crawl through. And we got out of there as fast as we could. I drove the kid home to his parents myself. I didn't report what I saw, at least not yet. A month later, I drove past that same building again. The whole lot was fenced off, and a large sign out front said it was under development for a new resort. I talked to one of the foremen standing by the gate, and he said they'd already had problems. Equipment breaking, workers injured, a small fire nobody could explain. A couple of people had been driven to the ER just that week. All broken bones due to an unexplainable equipment failure. After a few days, I couldn't shake it. Every time I thought about that building, I saw the thing standing there with a deer in its hand. I told myself it wasn't my problem anymore, that I'd done my part by getting Nathan out. But that didn't hold up. The news about the construction accidents kept coming in. Tools going missing, scaffolding collapsing, a worker breaking his leg after falling through a stairwell that had already been inspected. It felt wrong to know and stay quiet. So I sat down one night and wrote an email. I didn't use my real name. I created a new address, something generic, and I sent them 3 separate messages. One to a construction foreman, one to the listed property owner, and one to the local police. I told them what I'd seen. I wrote about the old building, about Daniel Reyes and his death, about the pattern of injuries happening now. I included a rough map of the area and a short note warning them not to work there after dark. I didn't use the word creature. I said something dangerous. I figured that would make it seem less like a joke. Before hitting send, I sat with the draft for a long time. My hands hovered over the keyboard. But then I thought about Danny, about Nathan, about the blood on the floor, and the trail that thing left behind. So I sent them all. Never got a response. Not from anyone. But that was fine. I didn't write them to get a reply. I did it because I couldn't sit and just hold that information. It was the only way I could live with what I'd seen. Though a couple days later, I heard the place had been officially sealed off by the city mayor. Well, it's been a few months since the thing at the construction site. Barney and I keep moving. We take jobs, quiet, small ones. I don't post anything online like the others. I'm not one for the cameras. I do write, though. Not for an audience, not really. Just on a small Reddit forum where people like me trade stories and half-believed encounters. It's part habit, part diary. I don't share everything, just the parts that help me think, the parts that remind me why the rules exist. Some people read it. They assume I'm making it all up. That's fine. Maybe I am in their world. I've been hearing about this new place lately. Somewhere out in West Texas, off a forgotten highway, where the land dips into a dry river basin. A few posts mentioned strange noises at night, livestock going missing, search parties losing their bearings. One hiker claimed to have seen something moving in the brush, something tall and watching. 3 eyes, 3 arms, and 3 feet. I don't know if it's the same thing, but it sure sounds like it. And I want to find out. So I'm heading there next week. It's reckless, probably stupid, but this work does not let you rest easy when there's still questions. I'll take the rules, and I'll take my chances.
My name is Michael, and I guess you could say I collect jobs the way some people collect postcards. I'm not really the settle down type. Never have been. I like moving from place to place, picking up whatever work I can find. The weirder the job, the better the story. Some people work for retirement. I work for the anecdotes. Not everything sticks, and that's kind of the point. You do something strange for a few weeks, see a side of the world you've never seen before, then pack up and move on. That's the good stuff. I've painted murals in an abandoned roller rink, helped a guy organize a collection of antique prosthetic limbs, even spent 2 months in Arizona walking dogs that were trained to detect termites. I didn't ask how that worked. Half the fun is not knowing. People think I must have flunked out of something, or that I'm running from something I'm not. I just like saying yes when something unexpected shows up. A normal job doesn't give you much to remember. A weird one, that's the kind of thing you bring back with you. I don't carry much. A couple changes of clothes, a notebook full of half-written stories, a thermos that leaks if you hold it the wrong way, and a toolbox I keep mostly for show. It rattles like I know what I'm doing, which helps in interviews. I've got everything I need to sleep in the car, cook a can of beans, and clean up in a truck stop bathroom. I travel light, and I leave even lighter. I don't worry about long-term plans. I've got no mortgage and no kids. I stay curious. That's all. People I meet along the way tend to open up, especially when they see I'm not trying to impress anyone. You show up on time, ask the right questions, and take the work seriously, even if the work itself is completely ridiculous, and you'd be surprised how many doors open. I once worked for a woman who needed someone to sit in her backyard every night and record whether or not the wind chimes made noise. She said it was for insurance. I didn't ask. Another time, I spent 2 weeks in the basement of a coin collector's house just sorting jars of loose change by the year printed on them. He never came downstairs once. I'm not about the money. I mean, sure, I've had lean months, eaten more gas station burritos than I care to count, but it is all worth it for those moments where you just stop and think, how the hell did I end up here? The last job I had was over in Idaho, delivering groceries for a place that didn't have a storefront. Just a warehouse, maybe even not that. I never saw inside. I'd get a list, pick up boxes, and drop them off. No receipts, no signatures. A few times, I knocked and someone opened the door just wide enough to take the box. Didn't say a word. Kind of thrilling, honestly. That gig dried up like they always do. One morning the van was gone and nobody was answering the office line. So I did what I always do when a chapter closes. I drove till I ran out of steam, found a diner with a bottomless coffee policy, and picked up a newspaper. And that's when I saw it. Small ad, no logo, no bold print, just 4 words. Postal clerk, immediate start. No phone number, just an address and a box number. It was so plain, it had to mean something weird. I circled it twice and smiled. The post office is about 20 minutes outside of town, and it looks exactly like you'd expect. 1-story building, faded red trim, American flag out front that's mostly just string now. No sign of anyone else working there when I showed up. Just a gray metal door, a buzzer, and the sound of the wind kicking dust around. I didn't even get an interview. I hit the buzzer, gave my name, and the lock clicked. Inside it was colder than I expected. Clean but old. The floors were a kind of yellow tile that might have been white once, and the lights made this low humming sound that never stopped. The front lobby was empty. No customers, no clerk window, just a few chairs and an old vending machine with a handwritten note taped to it that said, "Don't." Then someone called out my name from the hallway, and that's when I met Maria. She didn't look surprised to see me, just nodded and said, "You're the new guy." Not a question, just a fact. She handed me a badge with my name on it and a pair of work gloves that were already broken in. Maria's been here longer than me. 3 years, she says. That's about all I know for sure. She's quiet, keeps to herself, but not in a mean way. More like someone who's learned not to waste energy unless she has to. She wears the same green windbreaker every day and keeps her hair pulled back tight, like she's expecting something to fall from the ceiling. We're not friends exactly, but she's the only other person I've seen working here. She's nice, in a very specific way. Brings extra food in her lunch and splits it without asking. Tells me when to avoid the south hallway because the floor polishers are running. She mutters things under her breath sometimes. Prayers, maybe. Or just habits she's picked up from someone a long time ago. She says she's saving up to go back to school. Nursing, probably. Something useful. The postmaster hires people like that, she told me. People with 1 foot already out the door. People who won't ask too many questions. I didn't know we had a postmaster. I've never seen him. The job itself is simple if you don't think too hard about it. We move crates. We sort packages.
We load carts and seal pallets and label things with numbers that don't follow any system I've ever seen. Most of the shipments don't go through the front office. They come in through the back loading dock and get pushed down long hallways that don't always go where you think they should. Sometimes we get boxes with no return address, no weight listed, no sender, just a code, 6 digits, and a letter. Maria knows them all by heart. She keeps a little notebook in her back pocket, and when I asked her what was in it, she just said, "A map that doesn't work anymore." The building is bigger than it looks from the outside. A lot bigger. I've been working here for a few weeks, and I still haven't seen all of it. There are whole wings that are locked off, doors with no handles, and a basement that Maria says we don't use. When I asked her why, she said, "Because it's already full." When I asked her how long she's been working here, she said 3 years. Then she added, "That's long enough to forget what this building looked like before." I wanted to ask more, but the buzzer rang, and she was already moving. Most jobs fade after a while. A few details stick, the smell of the place, somebody's weird habit, maybe one story you tell at a bar when the conversation slows down. But usually, they blur together. This one didn't. I took the post office job for the same reason I've taken all the others. Because it was strange. Because it had a vibe to it. Because the ad was too plain to be normal. I figured I'd stick around for a few weeks, maybe a month, long enough to get a decent story out of it. What I didn't expect was how fast that story would start writing itself. I've worked in weird places before. I've met odd people. But there's something about this place, this building, this job, Maria, that doesn't sit like the others. It's not loud about it, doesn't throw it in your face. But once you're inside, it starts to peel you open. And I've seen things now. Small things at first. Odd labels. Doors that lead somewhere different the next day. Things that don't make sense. Maria says not to dwell on any one thing too long. Just scan and move. The longer you stare, the less it makes sense, she told me once. I came here to collect stories. That's still true. And this is the first one worth telling from the start. Story 1. Alright, so there's a strange hole in the basement. We call it the drop room. They didn't tell me about the basement when I started. Nobody gave me a tour of it. No one mentioned it in orientation. On the surface, the place looks normal. Old, quiet, little run down in spots, but still holding together. You wouldn't think there was anything unusual beneath your feet. Maria didn't bring it up either. Not at first. We worked the main floor, sorted crates, logged codes into a machine that looked older than either of us. It still prints on green and white paper with perforated edges. Most days follow the same rhythm. A truck shows up, we unload it, packages come in, packages go out. There are no customers. Everything's handled through back channels. Even the delivery logs use codes instead of names or addresses. A few weeks in, I started exploring a little during lunch breaks. Not snooping, just walking. The building goes on longer than you expect. Some hallways lead nowhere. Some dead end into locked doors. There's a room full of broken shelves. Another lined with bins that haven't been touched in years. Most of it's dimly lit, with that buzz you get from old lighting. And then I found the hatch. It was under the main floor, tucked behind a stack of unused mail carts. A big metal door set into the ground, thick and square, with faded yellow paint around the edges and stenciled letters across the top. Drop room access. Authorized staff only. Didn't look like a chute or a dumbwaiter. It looked like something from a ship. All steel and bolts and official looking. I leaned down to check for a handle. There was one. Heavy and cold. And as I reached for it, Maria's voice came sharp behind me. "Don't." I stood up fast and turned. She was standing a few feet away, arms crossed, not angry, just firm, like she already knew what I was about to do. "Yeah, I'm just checking. I didn't know we had a lower level," I said. "We don't. It's not for us," she replied. There was a long pause where neither of us moved. I smiled, tried to play it off. "What, you worried I'm gonna fall in?" She smiled back, but looked more nervous than anything. She just said, "Not unless you're told," and walked away. After that, I left the hatch alone for a while. I asked around later, just to see what I could learn. We don't have a lot of staff. As far as I can tell, it's just Maria, me, and 2 older guys who run the loading dock, but only on Wednesdays and Sundays. They keep their heads down. I tried to bring up the hatch in conversation once, and they acted like they didn't hear me. So I went looking through the office files instead. Most of it's junk: inventory forms, broken equipment records, delivery schedules printed in half-faded ink. But buried in the back of an old file cabinet, behind a stack of time cards from the 80s, I found a blueprint. The paper was yellowed and curled at the edges. It showed the building layout from above, then a cross-section of the underground levels. Most places only had 2. The storage basement and the access tunnel. But this one had a 3rd mark, 50 feet below, labeled Non-Operational Containment Bay. There were no stairs, no elevator, just one access point, the hatch I'd found. The maintenance logs were even thinner. Most pages were blank. One page from 1974 listed the bay as sealed indefinitely. The last person to sign off on it didn't write a name, just a scribble that looked more like a sketch than a signature. And that should have been the end of it. But then came the noise. It was late. Maria had already clocked out. I stayed behind to finish logging a mixed pallet that came in damaged. The overhead lights buzzed like they always do. The machine spat out forms one line at a time. I worked by habit, mind somewhere else, half listening to the clatter of cartwheels as I moved boxes from one end of the room to the other. And then I heard something underneath me. It wasn't the pipes. I know what pipes sound like. This wasn't a rattle or a drip. Wasn't the heating system either. Nothing mechanical. It was slow, heavy. I listened. It came again, louder this time. A long, wet, dragging noise, like fabric stuck to concrete. Then a pause. Then again. It sounded like the scenes in one of those old serial killer movies. The kind where the guy wraps a body in a tarp and hauls it across a basement floor. There was a scrape, a drag, a pause to catch breath. Slow and sure, like whoever was down there wasn't in a hurry. I walked toward the center of the room, toward the hatch, trying not to make noise. I leaned down real slow. Didn't open it, just listened. The dragging sound was coming from directly beneath me. Closer than it should have been. If the drop room really was 50 feet down. I stood up and backed away. I grabbed my jacket and left through the back entrance without finishing my forms. That was the first time I've done that since I started. The next morning, Maria didn't ask me why I left early. She just handed me a sandwich and said, "Truck's late today." I thought about telling her what I heard, but I didn't. Not yet. That noise should have been the strangest thing I'd run into here. It would make a good creepy story, too. The kind you tell your friends on late-night drives when you're trying to scare each other. But that hole in the basement wasn't the weirdest part about this place. You see, this place has some pretty strange rules. Alright, so story 2. We're not supposed to go out into the parking lot before 6 a.m. Maria told me the rule on my third night. We were sitting by the break room window. She was eating something wrapped in foil. Subway, maybe. I was logging damaged parcels. The sky outside was still dark, and I must have glanced at the lot without thinking, because that was right when she said it. "You know we don't go outside before 6, right?" I looked at her. "What, like a curfew?" "No, it's a rule," she replied. She didn't explain much after that. Just said something about a few missing persons cases around the area. I didn't push for more information when I saw how uncomfortable the topic made her. But from that point on, I noticed there was no reason to be out there before dawn anyway. All the trucks were parked by midnight. Deliveries didn't come in until mid-morning. The lights in the parking lot stayed on all night, but the camera above the bay door was always angled slightly down, like it wasn't meant to catch much past the edge of the building. Still, I listened. I never opened the doors before 6, not even to smoke. I've always been into true crime stuff. A friend of mine back in Oklahoma got me into it. We'd trade podcasts, watch old documentaries, dig into old cold cases. I liked the puzzle of it, the way things didn't always add up the way they should. So when Maria mentioned the rule, it stuck in my head like a splinter. One night after my shift, I looked it up. Wasn't easy. The post office doesn't show up on any public maps with its current name. You have to dig through old entries, back when it was listed under Federal Logistics. I found a few staff directories, some maintenance logs, then eventually something called Incident Review, Site 16. There were 5 files, all of them redacted, but not completely. Each one followed the same pattern. Time, between 2 and 5 a.m. Report, staff member failed to report its shift change. Action taken, lot searched, no sign. Result, terminated from payroll, no further details. The oldest one was from 1979. The newest was 1989. That's 10 years. 5 people. But the scariest part was a clip of an old security log someone had pulled from a VHS tape. The footage wasn't great. Black and white, jumpy, timestamp flickering. It showed the loading dock from above. An employee was sorting out packages. Nothing moved for the first few minutes. And then something passed between the trucks. It was a figure, tall enough that its head brushed the side mirrors of the mail trucks as it passed. And then the screen glitched. When it came back, every truck in the lot had its headlights on. All the doors were open, engines running, nobody behind the wheel. The lot looked like a stage, lit from every angle. And then the camera caught something standing directly in front of it. Not moving, just standing there, smiling. You couldn't see the whole face, just the lower half, the nose, the mouth, and a wide grin. First, I thought the footage was frozen. It stayed like that for over 3 minutes. Exactly 3 minutes and 21 seconds. Not a flicker of motion. And then I noticed the thing's chest, rising and falling. It wasn't a still frame. They were standing there the whole time, smiling into the lens. And then the screen glitched again. Hard. When it came back, the lot was empty. Trucks off, lights off, camera reset. No sign of him. And no sign of the employee assigned to that shift. Maintenance records said the engines had no fuel. Completely drained. Keys still in the ignition. The missing employee, a man named Richard Keller, was never found. And that's when HR added the rule, nobody outside before 6 a.m. I asked Maria about it the next day, just to see how much she'd tell me. I didn't bring up the footage. I just said, "Why 6?" She didn't answer right away. And then she said, "Because whatever walks through here at night doesn't like daylight." She said the old workers called it Mr. Widemouth. And after that, I couldn't let it go. I started treating it like a case file. The first victim officially linked to the series was a guy named Joseph Dunn, worked nights at a trucking depot about 12 miles from here. 46 years old, divorced, 2 kids, no criminal record. His car was found idling at the edge of the depot lot around 4:15 a.m. Door wide open, headlights on. No signs of struggle, no witnesses. The security cameras were disabled sometime between 3:40 and 3:55, and that was 1991. Joseph's body turned up 6 days later in Flat Rock Lake. Fully clothed, no water in the lungs, which meant he was already dead when he went in. The coroner's report noted severe internal blood loss, but no major wounds. Just 2 puncture marks on the back of each hand. The press didn't know what to do with it. Some called it a botched robbery, others suggested drugs. But the more you looked, the harder that theory was to believe. And then came the next one. Carla Brinker, 27, part-time clerk at a 24-hour diner off Route 3. Last seen on her smoke break around 2:30 a.m. Same thing. Car still running, purse untouched, no signs of struggle. Her body was found 2 weeks later, same leg, same marks, same blood loss. Then another, and another. In total, there were 7 confirmed cases, all night workers, all vanishing between 2 and 5 a.m., all found within the same 5-mile radius of the lake. The FBI opened an investigation after the 4th body, and for a while it made the local papers. The Flat Rock Killer, some called him. Others used the term Mr. Widemouth, borrowed from facility slang after someone leaked a copy of that old incident report. But just as quickly as it started, the coverage faded. No suspect, no clear motive, no witnesses. I found one interview with a retired sheriff's deputy, name redacted, who'd worked one of the early scenes. He described something that didn't make it in the official report. He said, "Yeah, I remember looking in the car. The seat was damp. Not with water, not blood either. Just this strange, cold residue. Like someone left a freezer door open. The creepiest part was the paper. Just 3 letters, folded real neat. Same in every pocket. Same ink. RJW. I ran that combination through every database I could think of. Nothing. No missing persons with those initials. No employees at the depot. No known aliases. I even checked gravestones in the local cemeteries. Each victim had one final detail. A small scrap of paper folded into their pants or jacket pocket. On every one was written the same 3 letters. RJW. No one ever figured out what it meant. A name, maybe. A message. A mark. The handwriting matched in all of them. Same ink, same fold. Like someone took their time. No prints. No smears, just those letters, always clean, always placed with care. I searched everything I could. Court records, police logs, graveyard listings, even local historical registries. Nothing ever matched. People have their theories, sure, but they don't hold. And like most stories with no ending, this one got filed away, shelved, left to gather dust. Still, the rule held. No one goes out in the parking lot before 6 a.m. There's no sign, no lock on the door. Nothing stops you but your own judgment. I've had chances. Early shifts, late nights. I've stood by the loading bay and watched the clock crawl towards 6. And some part of me has always waited for a reason to go out early. A good excuse. Something important enough to just push the door open. Truth is, this building's got more going on than anyone would guess from the outside. You'd think it was just another aging post office, holding up out here in the middle of nowhere. But the stories tucked into the corners, they run deep. And none run deeper than the one about the postmaster, if they're even a real person. Maria says they are. I beg to differ. I think there's something else entirely. Story 3. There's a black ledger on the postmaster's desk. It's bound in leather with no title on the cover, no markings on the spine, just a thick black book with a silver clasp that sometimes gets left unlocked when the office door is cracked open. We're not supposed to be in there. Most days the door stays closed, locked usually, but not always. The first time I saw it, I was pushing a cart past the front hallway and noticed the light was still on. The door was open about an inch, just enough to see the edge of the desk. The ledger was sitting right in the center, open. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. Inside were pages of careful handwriting, long entries written in clean cursive, the kind that probably came from years of practice. Instructions mostly, short directives with no context. Deliver 10 parcels to the archivist below. Mark each with red wax. Burn the paper trail. Relocate lost item 7B04 to containment south. Seal hatch if opened. Every entry ended the same way, signed off with a pair of letters. AB. Maria says that stands for Archivist Below, whoever that is. She said it in a low voice, like it wasn't meant to be repeated. I asked her once what below meant. The basement? The hatch room? I asked. She just shrugged as she handed me my 3rd cup of coffee that morning. People have different answers. That's the point. Sometimes mail comes in with no real sender and no origin code. Just a box or a sealed envelope, addressed plainly to the archivist below. Handwritten. No stamps, no tracking info. And always with the same thing on the seal. A red wax stamp. Perfectly round. Pressed with no symbol or mark. Just blank wax. We don't scan those. We don't record them in the system. Maria takes them directly to a back room that's kept locked at all times. I don't know what's in there. Nobody does. Unless they've been here long enough to earn a key. Maria's the only one I've seen with one. She says the orders come from upstairs, but the instructions always mention below. That part confuses me. The postmaster's office is on the main level. There's no working 2nd floor that I know of. And the basement, well, we've already talked about the basement. You know, the whole thing reminds me of the Screw Tape Letters, that book by C.S. Lewis. The one where a demon writes letters to his nephew from below, giving advice like a manager in a company no one wants to admit exists. There's something about the way these notes are worded that feels the same to me. Formal, vague, clean on the surface, but with something wrong underneath. I've tried to meet the postmaster. First week, I knocked on the office door with a stack of onboarding forms. No answer. Second time, I waited outside for almost an hour after my shift ended, thinking maybe I'd catch him on the way out. Never happened. Maria told me not to bother. He doesn't work normal hours, she said. but he signs off on everything. She nodded. That doesn't mean he's here. Over time, I started to notice that no one ever actually sees the postmaster. There are forms with his signature, orders typed on letterhead with his name. The break room calendar is marked with PM reviews on the last Friday of every month. But when the day comes, nobody meets with him. The review papers are just left in his tray, and the next morning they're gone. Handwritten notes show up later, always in that same cursive. At first I thought maybe it was a title passed around, like, I don't know, rotating supervisor. But then I noticed that the handwriting never changes. The name never changes. And Maria always talks about him the same way. Like he's one person, just somewhere else. We were sorting returns one night when I finally brought it up again. Okay, so has anyone ever actually met him? I asked. Maria was stealing a damaged crate. She didn't answer right away, then said, once. That got my attention. She looked down as she spoke, like she was just thinking out loud. There was a woman here before me, she began. She was the one who trained me. Older, smart, always on time. One day she came in shaking, wouldn't speak for the whole shift. She said she'd seen him, just once. I asked her what he looked like. And? I asked. Well, she said, like someone trying very hard to look normal. Maria said. After that, she started telling me little things. Not all at once, just pieces. Like she wasn't sure how much she should say, but needed someone else to hear it. She said the ledger's been here longer than any of the staff. No one knows when it started, or who kept it first. Every person who worked in this building has their name somewhere inside it, whether they've seen the book or not. And there's always that signature at the bottom. A.B. Archivist below. Some nights, Maria says she hears someone turning pages in the locked office, even when the building's empty. She never checks. She just keeps her head down and waits for the shift to end. I asked if she's ever opened the book herself. No, but I've seen what happens to people who try, she said. I wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her voice told me it wasn't a story she was ready to share. Not yet. She changed the subject. You ever wonder why the second floor is sealed off? She asked. I looked up. We have a second floor? She nodded toward the stairwell near the end of the south wing. I'd passed it 100 times. I thought it led to a storage closet. Used to be open, before things changed. Before what changed? I asked. I was always up for a good story. Maria paused, sealing the last box. She looked at me and said, before the postmaster stopped coming down. Story 4. The second floor doesn't show up on the official building map. You'd never know it existed unless someone pointed it out. Most people don't. Even the stairwell is easy to miss. Tucked behind the south hallway, where the old vending machines are, next to the door marked janitorial. The lights above it don't work. There's no elevator, no signage, and the staircase itself is chained off with thick metal links looped through every rail. A laminated sign hangs from one of the chains. Authorized access only. PM use. I'd passed the stairwell a dozen times before Maria mentioned it. I always assumed it led to storage, or maybe to the roof. The only time I was ever up there was to deliver random boxes to the second floor bathrooms, which I thought functioned as additional storage. I was wrong. One night, while we were unloading the back truck, She asked me if I'd ever noticed the ceiling.
What about it? I said.
You ever hear it move?
I shrugged. I mean, buildings creak. This place is old.
Maria didn't say anything for a while. And then she asked if I'd seen the deliveries.
The Thursday ones?
I asked for confirmation. She nodded.
Of course I'd seen them. Same schedule every week. A box arrives sometime in the early hours, already sitting on the loading dock by the time we show up. It's wrapped in thick brown paper, tied with twine, and always sealed tight. No sender, no barcode, no address. Just a typed note stapled to the top. Leave by second floor bathroom door. Do not open. The first time I helped carry one, I noticed the smell. Rot. Not garbage, not food waste. Something worse. It's wet and sour, like raw meat. Wasn't a small box either. Took both of us to carry it. And even then, it felt unbalanced, like something was shifting inside. I asked Maria what it was. She didn't answer right away, then said, "It's for the nephew." I laughed. "So the postmaster's got a nephew now?" "That's what people say." She nodded as we headed down the stairs. "Wait, like he lives up here?" Maria looked away as we entered the break room. "Something like that," she said. And that was the first time I started paying attention to the ceiling. At night, especially on Wednesdays, the day before the delivery, you can hear it. Footsteps. They move from one end of the ceiling to the other, crossing above the break room, the locker hall, sometimes over the mail sorting floor. Maria never mentions it. You just hear it and keep working. I joked once that it sounded like someone pacing. Maria nodded and gave me another one of those nervous smiles of hers. "He doesn't sleep well." I tried asking around, but there wasn't anyone else to ask. Most of the older guys that unload the trucks don't talk about that part of the building. They call it the locked floor. One of them said it used to be employee offices decades ago. Another said there were dorms back when they housed staff on site. But that part shut down before Maria even started. She said she only learned about it through old paperwork she found in the back rooms. There's a wall of file cabinets near the maintenance closet, way in the back past the unused locker wing. Nobody touches them now, but she used to sort through the documents when shifts were slow. Said it helped her understand what kind of place this really was. And that's where she found the article. An old newspaper clipping. No date printed, but the edges were browned, and the font was the type they used in the 60s or 70s. Talked about a fire. A rural family, name redacted, whose home burned down just outside the county limits. Only one survivor, a boy. No name, no photo. Just referred to as the nephew of a federal employee. Maria didn't have proof it was connected, but she said the paper was stamped in the corner. Internal. Postmaster Records. She said her grandmother used to tell stories about creatures called unmentionables. Monster stories her family used to keep her and her siblings in line during childhood. The term unmentionables rang a bell with me. Wait. Zombies? I asked. Not like on TV, she began. They're not slow and they're not stupid. They can think, talk, remember who they were, but they still have to feed. I tried asking for more details, like a name or description, but Maria could never give me a straight answer. I figured she didn't know much either.
What I do know is that every Thursday we haul the same box to the same upstairs door. Always the same weight. Always the same smell. There's a small hallway that runs past the base of the stairs, short, maybe 10 feet, ending in a door labeled restroom, staff only. It's old and dented, but still locked from the inside. We leave the box against it and walk away. By the time our shift ends, it's gone. I've never heard the door open. I've never heard it unlock. But the package is never there in the morning. The chains on the stair rail have a padlock on them. It's old but functional. There's dust on the upper steps, but like I said, not all of them. Someone still walks there. Not often. Just enough to be noticed by the people who pay attention. I do now. The footsteps, the smell, the missing packages. There is something upstairs. Maybe it's the postmaster's nephew. Maybe it's something older. Something left behind when the second floor was shut down. But whatever it is, it's still there. And it doesn't come downstairs. Not yet. And yeah, that's all I've got for now. 4 stories, more or less. A hole in the basement nobody's supposed to open. A parking lot with its own schedule. A ledger full of orders from someone nobody's seen. And something, or someone, pacing the second floor above our heads every Thursday night. You wouldn't think a post office in the middle of nowhere would have this much going on. But here we are. I've started writing some of it down, just to keep track. Not everything, just the parts that stand out. The odd ones, the pieces that don't quite fit. Maybe someday I'll pass them along. Maybe they'll end up in someone else's notebook down the line. For now, they're mine. Maria says she's planning to leave soon. A semester or 2 of nursing school, if the financial aid comes through. She doesn't talk much about it, but I know she's already got the paperwork in a folder tucked behind the break room microwave. When she goes, I'll probably head out too. I can't imagine being here alone. Very scary thought. But I'm not done yet. And I get the feeling this place is not done with me either. Hey, huge thank you to all my patrons. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, there's a link in the description. I hope you enjoyed the story, and have a good night. My name is Cole Keaton, and I make a living buying things people don't understand and selling them to people who do. Antiques, estate pieces, forgotten collections pulled out of basements after someone dies. I don't restore them, and I don't get attached. I identify value, confirm authenticity, and move them along. If it can sit in a glass case or disappear into a private vault, I've probably handled something like it. I've also bent rules to get there. Nothing, too dramatic. No headlines. But I've skimmed when I knew no one would notice. I've flipped items with paperwork I didn't ask too many questions about. I've let grief work in my favor more than once. If someone wanted to call that unethical, I wouldn't argue. I'd just tell them that's how business works. I'd done enough questionable things over the years that my internal warning system was dulled. If a deal looked strange but paid well, I learned to look at the numbers instead of the shape of it. Missing details didn't bother me. Silence didn't bother me. People who wanted discretion usually did. So when the job offer came through, short notice, one night only, NDA, flight included, it didn't strike me as unusual. If anything, it sounded like the kind of work that didn't want a paper trail. Most people would have seen red flags. I saw efficiency. The money was wired before I asked a single follow-up question. And I accepted. The plane wasn't a passenger jet. It was a cargo plane, wide and hollow, the kind with a ribbed metal interior and tie-down rails bolted into the floor. No windows I could see, no flight attendants, just a single fold-down seat mounted near the center. The rest of the plane was packed with Christmas trees. That was the cargo. Not pallets, not crates, trees. Dozens of them. Packed so tightly their branches were crushed together under cargo netting. Every single one fully decorated. Ornaments, tinsel, everything. And the entire time, Christmas music was playing. Loud. Big brass sections. Choirs. Bells layered on top of bells. The speakers were mounted somewhere in the cargo bay, and they were cranked high enough that the sound bounced off the walls. I hated it. I hate Christmas. You know, people hear that, and they assume it's a personality quirk, or that I'm trying to be edgy. I am not. I just learned early that Christmas isn't what people pretend it is. It's a performance, and if you miss your cue, you're the one who pays for it. When I was a kid, my mom was an alcoholic. Not the kind you see in movies. No bottles hidden in the walls, no dramatic interventions. She held the job, paid the bills, functioned just well enough that nobody stepped in, which meant it was just the two of us year after year. Every December, she'd ask me what I wanted for Christmas. You know, she always sounded sincere when she asked. I believed her the first few times. I'd tell her something small, you know, a toy, a game, a book, something simple. And every year, she forgot. Not just the gift, the conversation. Christmas morning would come and I'd wake up early, sit by the tree and wait. Hours would pass. Noon would come and go. By the time she stumbled home, it was always dark out. She'd act surprised that it was Christmas. Sometimes there were no presents. Sometimes there was something random she'd grabbed on the way home. A sweater that didn't fit. A DVD I already owned. One year, she handed me a candy bar from a gas station and said we'd do something special later. We never did. By the time I was 8, I stopped expecting anything. That was the year she came home so drunk she couldn't make it to her own bedroom. Passed out on the couch with the TV still blaring carols. I shut it off, pulled a blanket over her, cleaned vomit off the armrest with paper towels because it was already drying. That's not something an 8-year-old should know how to do. So when that music blasted through the cargo plane, song after song insisting that everybody should be happy, I didn't feel nostalgic. I felt trapped, wedged between decorated trees, freezing, listening to voices sing about joy like it was mandatory. I stared at the ornaments inches from my face and reminded myself of the only rule that ever mattered. Don't expect anything. The music kept playing all the way until the wheels hit the ice. The plane didn't land. It felt like it crashed. There was no warning, no gradual descent. 1 second the engines were droning steadily, Christmas music blaring overhead, and the next the entire cargo bay dropped hard enough to throw me out of my seat. I hadn't buckled in. My shoulder hit first, then my ribs. I went sideways into the trees, branches snapping and ornaments shattering as I crashed through them. Needles scraped my face. Something sharp cut my cheek. I bounced off one trunk, then another. The air punched out of my lungs as I hit the floor. And that damn music kept playing. I tried to get my hands under me and slammed shoulder first into another tree. Real pine branches scraped my face, needles biting my skin. Sap smeared across my jacket, and something sharp sliced my cheek, and I felt warm blood run immediately. Ornaments shattered as I crashed through them, glass popping and skittering across the floor. The trees slowed me down. That was the only reason I didn't break something. Trunks bent, branches snapped. Needles filled my mouth when I hit again. It hurt like hell. Every impact knocked the air out of me, rattled my teeth, sent pain flaring through my ribs and back. The engine screamed. The cargo bay lurched sideways, and I went with it, lifted off my feet and thrown hard into another wall of trees. A heavy branch caught me across the chest. I yelled, but the music swallowed it completely. And then the Christmas music stopped. No fade, no warning, just gone. At the same instant, the plane jolted again. Without the music to mask it, the sound was violent, and I was flung one last time into the trees. Then nothing. No engines, no music. I lay there gasping, staring up at the branches swaying overhead. Broken ornaments dangled from bent wire hooks. My hands were shaking when I finally pushed myself upright. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken. The rear ramp groaned as it began to lower. Snow was coming down hard, sideways in the wind. A full whiteout that swallowed the plane almost as soon as I stepped onto the ice. Visibility dropped to a few yards at best. The whole world reduced to blowing white and the dark shape of a warehouse ahead. Cold air hit immediately. I staggered toward the opening, stepping over snapped branches and shattered glass as the ramp hit solid ground. Ice, flat and dull, stretching out in every direction beneath a sky that didn't look day or night. There were no runway lights, no markings, no vehicles waiting, just open emptiness. The cargo plane didn't wait. Behind me, the ramp already started to rise. I turned in time to see it seal itself shut, metal locking into place. The engines roared back to life, and within seconds the plane was lifting off again, vanishing into the low clouds like it never even been there. The wind picked up immediately, cutting across the ice and biting through my jacket. I stood there for a long time, chest still tight from the fall, and then I looked out across the empty expanse in front of me. And that's when the color hit me. The warehouse wasn't dull or industrial or camouflaged against the ice. It was bright red. Not faded, not weathered, not painted over metal, showing through at the edges. It was the kind of red that looks wet even when it isn't. Christmas red. The kind you see on wrapping paper that hasn't been creased yet. On bows that still hold their shape. On displays that are meant to be noticed from far away. That color did not belong out here, surrounded by nothing but ice and sky. It looked dropped into place, like a mistake no one had corrected. As I walked closer, the shape became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just a warehouse, it was shaped like a present. Perfectly rectangular, tall and wide, with edges so sharp they looked machined. A massive ribbon wrapped around the entire structure. Thick, dark bands running vertically and horizontally, bolted straight into the walls like load-bearing supports. Where a bow should have been, the roof rose into a twisted knot of metal loops, exaggerated and deliberate, like someone had tried to sculpt a bow out of steel. The red surface was flawless. No scratches. No ice buildup somehow. No snow clinging to the base. The color hadn't dulled in the cold, hadn't chipped or cracked. It looked maintained, polished. There were no tire tracks leading to it, no road, no cleared path. Nothing that explained how something this big had gotten here, or how anyone accessed it. It just sat on the ice, like it'd always been there. I approached the front, boots slipping slightly with each step. The seam of a door was worked clearly into the ribbon pattern. No handle, no keypad, no visible lock. Just a precise outline, almost invisible unless you were close enough to see it. I raised my hand, not sure what I planned to do. And before I could touch it, there was a deep mechanical click from inside. The door unlocked. It slid open just wide enough for me to step through. And then it closed behind me with a heavy final thud. The cold followed me in. Inside, the space opened into a vast concrete interior, the ceiling disappearing into shadow above. Long rows of crates stretched away from the entrance, stacked neatly, and marked with stenciled numbers. Candles burned throughout the warehouse, placed at precise intervals. Their flames were steady. The walls were lined with paper, flyers, warnings. They weren't all the same flyer, and that was what made them worse. Some were newer, printed on clean white paper with sharp black ink. Others were yellowed, curling at the edges, held to the wall with strips of old tape that had lost its grip. A few looked like they'd been copied so many times, the letters were starting to blur. I stopped long enough to read 3 of them. The first one was centered at eye level. The Candy Cane Massacre, 1976. Do not allow striped tools or decorations into Workshop B, it read. Krampus is attracted to the scent of sugar and dye. 8 elves lost. No remains recovered. Below that, someone had written a handwritten note in red marker. If it looks festive, it isn't worth it. The second flyer was older, thicker paper. The font looked like it come from a typewriter. The Silent Night Incident, 1989. Music after curfew resulted in a breach. Krampus mimicked carols to draw staff out of hiding. 11 elves lost before containment was restored. Someone had underlined mimicked 3 times. The third one was newer than the others. The ink hadn't faded yet. The North Wing breach, 4 days before Christmas. 9 elves lost. Cause: rule deviation. Krampus ate them. I kept walking, noticing more names as I passed. The Tinsel Fire, 1954. The Bell Tower Failure, 2003. The Sleigh Bell Lockdown, date redacted. Every flyer followed the same structure. Event name, year, rule broken, body count. Whoever worked here didn't memorialize the dead. They documented mistakes. The further I went in, the more candles I saw. Each one placed exactly where it needed to be, spaced evenly along the floor and on crate corners. Near the entrance, a folding table had been set up like a checkpoint, and on it sat a clipboard held down by a heavy stone. There was one sheet of paper, and my name was printed neatly at the top. Welcome Cole Keaton, member of the naughty list. Here are your rules to survive the North Pole. Before I could read a single word, someone spoke behind me. Hi. I turned. She stood a few feet back, leaning against a crate like she'd been there the whole time. Normal height? Blonde hair tucked under one of those pointed red hats elves wear, the long soft kind that droops to one side. I'd seen them in decorations my whole life. Seeing one in person made my brain stall for a second. She was smoking a cigarette. The ember glowed bright against the cold air. New here, huh? Yeah, I replied, She nodded, like that confirmed something. And then she held out the cigarette. Want one?
Sure, I replied.
She lit another for herself, shielding the flame with her palm. And we smoked in silence for a few seconds, just looking at each other. The cigarette tasted like licorice. So you here by yourself? She asked.
Looks like it.
She laughed quietly. Yeah, they like doing that. I glanced back at the rules page in my hand, and then at the flyers on the wall.
So you work here?
Oh, I used to. Sort of, she said. I took another drag. Sort of. She shrugged. I got kicked out.
Kicked out from where?
She smiled around the cigarette. The workshop, silly. I nodded like that meant something to me. It did not. None of this did. She exhaled smoke slowly. Smoking's a problem for them, you know. Fire risk. 400 million presents are pretty flammable, they say. She took a final drag, then pressed the cigarette out against the concrete with the sole of her boot. I followed her example. She nodded toward the page in my hand. You know, you should read those.
Yeah, I said.
All of them, she continued. And this time there was not any humor in it. I unfolded the paper again. She leaned in just enough to glance at it, then leaned back. They'll know if you skim. I didn't ask who they were. What's your name? I asked instead. She blinked once, like she hadn't expected basic manners out of me. Holly.
Holly, I repeated.
Oh, don't laugh, she said.
I wasn't going to.
She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me, and then she adjusted her hat. And when she did, the brim shifted, and I saw it again. One ear, just for a second, pointed. She saw my eyes catch it, and didn't bother hiding it. Yep, that too, she said. I glanced back at the flyers, then at the candles, then at the endless crates. I didn't know what to do with any of it, so I did what I always did. I didn't do anything. Holly hooked a thumb over her shoulder. Well, I've got wrapping to do.
Wrapping, I repeated.
She smirked. Presents. The whole point of the place, you know, trying to keep up. She took 2 steps, then stopped and looked back at me. It's your night, she said. Don't get clever. Don't wander. Don't decide you're the exception. I held up the page.
So what, I just follow these?
Yes, she interrupted. Follow them exactly. She turned slowly and walked away between the crates, and I watched her go. I snapped myself out of it. Now's not the time, Cole. You've got other things to think about. I looked back down at the page. I read, Rules for North Pole Night Operations. Subject, Cole Keaton. Status, Naughty List, active. Read them once, read them right. These rules decide who lasts the night. Rule number 1. Keep the candles burning bright. Darkness feeds what hunts at night. If a candle fades or dies, relight it fast or change your side. Number 2. If animal stink fills nose and head, stay in the glow. Do not tread. Do not run, do not go. You can't outrun fate. You already know. 3. If someone cries for help outside, do not answer, do not decide. Doors stay shut once night is here. Nothing living waits out there. Rule 4. Krampus wears a Santa face. Same red suit, same boots, same pace. One brings gifts, one keeps the score. Choose the wrong one, nothing more. Rule 5. If you see eyes low, wide, and bright, do not move and do not fight. The Yule cat waits for those who stray. Stillness keeps its claws at bay. And rule number 6. Don't be naughty. Don't test fate. Greed will make you hesitate. I read it twice, then a third time, slower. I folded the page carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. And I stood there by the candle, waiting to find out which rule would matter first. It didn't take long. Every candle in the warehouse went out at once. The light didn't fade. It collapsed. Darkness slammed in so fast my eyes couldn't adjust. I stood there blind, heart kicking hard against my ribs, hands hovering uselessly in the dark. And then something hit from below. A deep boom rolled up through the floor, heavy enough to rattle my teeth. The concrete seemed to flex under my boots. Another boom. Closer. My brain locked up. How do I light them? All the candles. What do I have to light candles with? I said out loud. I can't even see them. Another boom slammed upward, close enough that dust shook loose somewhere above me. The darkness pressed in, total now. I took a step and nearly stumbled. Then I saw it. A faint glint near the folding table. Not light exactly, just a soft metallic shine, like something catching illumination that shouldn't exist. The lighter? Holly's lighter. It was glowing. Not enough to light the room, but enough to show itself, like it wanted to be found. I lunged for it, fingers closing around warm metal. And the moment I picked it up, the glow sharpened, outlining the wheel and the cap in dull orange. Another boom hit, right beneath me now. Something scraped. A low, monstrous sound rolled through the floor, thick and wet. I flipped the lighter open and struck the wheel. Nothing. Again, sparks. Again, flame. I jammed it in the nearest candle wick, and it caught instantly, a small flame flaring to life. The pressure eased for half a second. I didn't stop. I moved fast, lighting candle after candle, hands shaking, lighter burning hot against my fingers. Each flame pushed the darkness back a little more, like it didn't want to leave, but it had no choice. The booms were right under me now. The floor bowed slightly, groaning under the weight of something massive pressing up. One candle left. The monstrous sound rose, close enough that I felt it in my bones. I struck the lighter again. The flame sputtered. I struck it again, and the final candle caught. And light came back into the warehouse all at once. The sound stopped mid-breath. The pressure vanished. I stood there, frozen, lighter clenched in my hand, chest heaving. Nothing moved. It was gone. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting for the light to betray me again. It didn't. The candles held. The warehouse stayed still. I picked one candle up from a crate and started walking. The farther I went, the less the place felt like storage, and the more it felt like a house everyone had stepped out of mid-conversation. Doors stood open, hallways curved where straight lines shouldn't. The crates gave way to rooms. A room filled with shelves of wrapped gifts, each one tagged with neat handwriting. Names, ages, places. A room where toys floated softly in the air, rotating as if being inspected by hands I couldn't see. A room where paintbrushes cleaned themselves in jars, colors bleeding and separating like living things. Magic. It was magic. And no one there. The candlelight stretched and bent as I walked, shadows moving in ways that didn't match my steps. I passed a work table where a half-finished doll sat upright, its glass eyes catching the flame. I think it was watching me. Somewhere above me, something chimed softly. And that's when I heard it. A soft clicking sound. I followed it into a smaller room tucked off to one side, one that felt quieter than the rest. A little boy sat on the floor, legs crossed, pushing a toy car back and forth in front of him. He looked up when I stepped inside. "Hi," he said and waved. I stopped. He was young, 7, maybe 8, pale but calm, wearing a hoodie that swallowed up his hands. He smiled like kids do when they've been waiting a long time and someone finally shows up. "Hello," I said. "You're not my dad," he replied. "Just stating a fact." "No, I'm not," I replied. "He's late," the boy said, going back to his car. "But that's okay, he's working extra." "Yeah?" "Yeah, he said this Christmas he's bringing me something special." The boy looked up again. "He promised." I noticed it then, the bracelet on his wrist, a hospital band, faded but still readable, the plastic worn soft from too much handling. When he shifted, I saw the small mark just below it, a healed IV site. "My name's Max," he said. "Hello, Max," I replied. He nodded and pushed the toy car forward again, then pulled it back. He kept it inside the candlelight without thinking about it. "He said he'd be back," Max began. "He always comes back late, but this year he said it'd be worth it." "Why's that?" I asked. Max smiled. "He's bringing me a train set." "He told me about it all already," Max went on. "It's old, like the kind with metal parts. He said it cost a lot, but that's okay. He said I deserve it." I watched his hands as he played. The car never made a sound when it touched the floor. No scrape or click. "I'm waiting here," Max said, "so he knows where I am." "Okay," I said. Max looked up at me again. "You can go if you want." "I know," I replied. I took a step back. Max didn't follow me with his eyes. He just kept playing, patient and focused, like time didn't matter to him anymore. I backed out of the room and closed the door. I stood there for a moment, then turned and kept walking. I didn't need to think about what Max was. I already understood. The kid was dead. I didn't know where his dad was, or how long he'd been working late, or what kind of factory job justified all that waiting. But I knew one thing for sure. Ghosts don't get train sets. Hell, I didn't even get a present when I was a kid, and I wasn't dead. Look, that's not cruelty, okay? That's math. Life doesn't circle back and make things fair just because someone suffered, okay? It moves on. It forgets. It leaves things unfinished, and, that's how life is. I kept walking. The hallway curved away from the room, the candle flame steady in my hand. The workshop stretched on, rooms branching off in quiet symmetry, toys suspended mid-task, like the place had paused itself out of courtesy. I didn't look back. feeling bad wouldn't help him, okay? Wouldn't help me either. I had rules to follow, candles to keep lit, a night to survive. And whatever this place was, it wasn't built for reunions. Still, as I moved deeper into the workshop, I found myself checking the tags on the wrapped gifts I passed. Names I didn't recognize, addresses I'd never heard of. I told myself that meant nothing. As I walked, I told myself a lot of things. The candlelight stayed steady as I passed into another section of the workshop, this one narrower, the ceiling lower. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with half-finished toys and bins of parts, wheels, gears, tiny brass screws sorted by size. Everything was too quiet. And then I smelled it. Not pine, not wax. Animal. Big animal. The kind of smell you notice in barns and stockyards. Rule 2. If animal stink fills nose and head, stay in the glow, do not tread. Do not run, do not go. You can't outrun fate. You already know. I stopped where I was, and the smell grew stronger. That didn't mean it was closer. I remembered that part. The rule hadn't bothered explaining why. I tightened my grip on the candle and stayed put. Something moved ahead of me. Not fast, wasn't sneaking. Slow and deliberate. I didn't move. My instincts screamed at me to back up, to turn around, to put distance between myself and whatever was coming. But instincts are great for getting you killed in places like this. I've read enough stories. The smell deepened. Earthy, musky. It was wrong indoors. And then I saw the eyes. Low, wide, bright. They opened just beyond the reach of the candlelight, two pale discs hovering in the dark, unblinking. They stayed there, level with my knees, watching. Rule 5. If you see eyes low, wide, and bright, do not move, do not fight. The Yule cat waits for those who stray. Stillness keeps its claws at bay. Oh my God. It was real. I'd heard stories about it when I was a kid. Not the kind you read in books or see on TV, the kind, that get told quietly, late at night, when someone's had a little too much to drink and starts remembering things they're not supposed to. My grandfather had told me once. He was from the old country, thick accent, hands like bricks. He didn't believe in much, but when he talked about Christmas, he always got serious. Said there were things that came out in winter, things older than Santa, older than churches, things that watched houses and waited. He called it the Yule cat, said it was huge, bigger than any animal had a right to be, lived in the dark and ate the lazy, the careless, the ones who didn't earn their place, workers who skipped their duties, people who took and thought they'd never be noticed. He used to say you didn't run from it. Running meant you'd already lost. You stayed still. You stayed where the light touched you. And if you were lucky, and if you hadn't given it a reason, it would decide you weren't worth the effort. The eyes shifted slightly, tracking the flame in my hand. Something massive moved behind them, its outline refusing to settle into anything solid. I heard a sound like fabric tearing slowly, followed by the scrape of claws against concrete. I did not move or breathe. The candle guttered once. My heart jumped into my throat. But the flame held. The eyes lingered another second, then blinked, and then sank back into the darkness. The smell faded with them. I stayed frozen long after the eye was empty, and when I finally moved, it was only to step backward, careful not to let any part of me slip out of the light. And for the first time since I arrived, I didn't question the rules. I completely believed them. I hadn't taken more than a few steps before I heard it. "Help!" The voice was thin, desperate. A child's voice. I froze. "Please," it called again. "It's freezing out here." The sound came from the far side of the workshop, near the outer wall, near one of the doors. Rule 3 slid into my head. If someone cries for help outside, do not answer, do not decide. I moved anyway. Not toward the door, just close enough to see. There was a window set into the wall beside it, tall and narrow, the glass rimmed with frost. Snow hammered against it from the blizzard outside, white streaks blurring everything beyond. A little boy stood on the other side, barely older than Max. His cheeks were red from the cold. His hair was matted with snow. He hugged himself tight, shivering hard enough I could see it through the glass. He knocked again, small and frantic. "Please, I can't feel my hands." I took another step closer before I stopped myself. There's a door right there," the boy said, nodding toward it with his chin. His teeth were chattering now. "Please, I just need to get out of the cold." His breath fogged the glass in uneven burst. Snow stuck to his eyelashes and melted down his cheeks like tears. I'm really cold. My mom told me not to go outside alone. I didn't listen." My hand lifted before I realized it moved. And then I saw what he was pressing against the window. They weren't hands. They were dark and split, thick and rounded at the ends, polished smooth, like they'd been worn down on stone. Hooves. The boy looked down at them too, and for a second his face went blank, and then he smiled. He looked back up at me, eyes shining bright in the reflected candlelight. "You're gonna die here, Cole." I staggered back. The knocking stopped. I grabbed the heavy curtain beside the window and yanked it closed, the fabric slamming against the wall. I turned immediately to the door and checked the lock, then checked it again, making sure the bolt was thrown all the way. On the other side of the curtain, the voice was still there, amused. I could hear it laughing on the other side. I stayed there listening until the voice stopped. I didn't stop moving after that. I put distance between myself and the door, the curtain, the voice outside. The workshop opened up again, corridors branching off in quiet curves, candlelight stretching out of me. Then I found myself in a new room, and the door shut behind me. I turned as the lock slid into place. The room was huge, wider than it looked from the outside, and it was full of Santa suits, dozens of them. They stood in rows, shoulder to shoulder, all facing away from me. Red coats, white trim, black belts, heavy boots planted squarely on the floor. Some were taller than others, some broader. A few leaned forward slightly, like they were off balance. Above them, hanging from chains bolted into the ceiling, was a wooden sign. It said, pick one. I took a step forward. An arm moved. Just one. A white-gloved hand lifted a few inches, then settled again. Farther back, something shifted enough for a faint glow to appear beneath the brim of a Santa hat. I stopped breathing. I scanned the figures as quickly as I could. Some of the Santas had arms that bent wrong at the elbows. One shifted, and I saw hooves where boots should have been. Another had antlers pressing against the inside of its hat, stretching the fabric. These weren't decorations. I remembered Rule 4. Krampus wears a Santa face. Same red suit, same boots, same pace. One brings gifts, one keeps the score. Choose the wrong one. Nothing more. Then I saw it, all the way in the back, smaller and plainer. The red looked faded. The belt buckle was simple metal, scratched and dull. The beard hung straight instead of curled. The face was familiar. My grandfather had kept one just like it on the shelf above the fireplace. Same expression, same crooked smile. Same chip near the base, actually, where it had been dropped once and glued back together. I moved. Hands reached for me as I passed. Gloves brushed my jacket. Fingers and claws closed around air inches from my sleeves. One set caught fabric and yanked hard enough to spin me sideways, but I tore free and kept going. The temperature jumped all at once. Heat rolled through the room. Red fabric split open as I ran past, tearing away to reveal horned faces beneath. Mouths opened. Teeth showed. Something stepped forward at the back of the room. It was taller than the others, broader. The suit fitted better, like it'd been meant for this body. Krampus. One long arm extended toward me, claws spreading slowly. I ducked under it by inches. I stumbled forward and slammed into the Santa statue at the back of the room, grabbing it with both hands. And everything stopped. The heat vanished. The room emptied. Every other figure was gone. I stood there alone, clutching the statue, my chest heaving. The door behind me was open, and I didn't look back. I made my way back toward the front of the workshop. The candles were still burning. The doors were open now. The place felt quieter than before, like it was finished with whatever it needed from me. And that's when I heard someone laughing. A man stood near the main loading area, half hidden behind stacks of wrapped gifts. Mid-30s maybe. Puffer jacket. Gloves shoved into his pockets. He had a large canvas bag slung over his shoulder, already bulging. He was shoveling presents into it. Boxes, wrapped packages, stuff that clearly didn't belong to him. He looked up when he saw me and grinned. I don't know why they invited us here, man, but they're saps. I have made a killing tonight. He reached into the bag and pulled something out at random. Electronics, jewelry, watches, stuff that didn't look like it'd ever been on a shelf. $500,000, man, easy. I didn't respond. He laughed and kept going. Plane comes back. I toss this in and I'm gone, man. Back home by morning. Rich. He dug deeper into the bag, then paused. Oh, yeah. You want this? Take it, man. I can't carry it all, he said, pulling something out carefully. He held out a box. A train set. Heavy, antique. The kind I recognized instantly. Custom work, metal parts, hand-painted details. The kind collectors fought over. "50K easy," he said. "Probably more. Custom job, take it, man. I got plenty. You can pawn that back in the States and do damn well." I took it. The weight of it settled into my hands. "You know what this place is?" I asked. He shrugged. "Does it matter? Nobody's here, man. Whatever it is, it's a joke. These people are chumps, dude. We can take what we want and just leave." He adjusted his bag and nodded toward the door. Outside through the snow, I could see a plane descending. "Come on," he said. I didn't answer. I looked down at the box in my hands. Train set was heavier than it looked. Real metal. The kind of train that doesn't exist anymore unless someone goes out of their way to make it. I turned it slightly and saw the tag tied to the handle with red string. Handwritten. Max Wilkerson, age 7, from Santa. Below that, in smaller letters, it read, "We didn't forget you." Something in my chest shifted. The man followed my eyes and snorted, "Kid stuff, right? Probably left over. You know how places like this are." I didn't say anything. Outside, the plane's engines grew louder as it dropped through the snow, landing hard on the ice beyond the door. The ramp began to lower. He turned and jogged toward the plane, bag bouncing against his back, packages shifting inside it. I stayed where I was. The wind howled in through the open door, snow blasting sideways into the workshop. The candles flickered, but didn't go out. He looked back at me for a second, confused, then annoyed. "Suit yourself." The ramp closed. The plane lifted off almost immediately, engines screaming as it climbed into the storm. I stepped closer to the doorway and watched it rise, lights blinking red against the clouds. I don't know why exactly I didn't get on it. The sky darkened. Not with weather. Something massive moved above the workshop, the storm folding inward around it. The clouds parted just enough for me to see the shape forming inside them. Horns, a head the size of a building. There was no mistaking it. Krampus. Not a shadow, not a trick of light. A towering shape carved out of a shadow and red cloud, antlers twisting back into the storm, eyes burning like embers deep set into a skull that shouldn't have existed in the sky. The plane climbed straight toward him. Its lights blinked red against the clouds, the engines straining as it tried to gain altitude. For a moment, it looked small enough to be a toy. Krampus opened his mouth. It was wider than the wingspan of the plane. Rows of teeth unfolded inside it, layer after layer. The engines cut out, and the plane vanished into his mouth. The clouds closed then, and the storm collapsed back into itself like it'd never been there. I stood there in the open bay, still holding the train set. I just stood there. The only thing I could think to do was go back. I carried the train set through the workshop, past the candles in the quiet rooms, back down the curved hallway to the side room. The door was still there, and I opened it. Max was asleep. He lay on the side of the narrow bed, the blanket pulled up to his shoulders. The hospital band is still around his wrist. The candle on the small table beside him burned low and steady. I didn't wake him. I set the box down carefully on the floor next to the bed, close enough that he'd see it when he opened his eyes. I picked up the note and placed it on top of the box. Max Wilkerson, age 7. From Santa. We didn't forget you. The little ghost boy shifted slightly in his sleep, his fingers curling around the blanket. But he didn't wake up. I backed out of the room and quietly closed the door. The workshop felt different now, quieter. I walked back to the front and sat down in the metal chair near the entrance. The blizzard was still tearing across the ice outside, white and endless, the wind pushing snow sideways, hard enough to blur everything beyond a few feet. I sat there and stared into it. I thought about the plane, about the room with the Santas, about the kid asleep in the back with a train beside his bed. I didn't know what was supposed to happen next. And then I heard it. The sound came from outside. Through the blowing snow, shapes descended out of the sky. Dark at first, then clearer as they came lower. Reindeer. Big ones, though I didn't know how big a reindeer was. Harnesses cutting through the storm. A sleigh settling onto the ice with a heavy scrape. The wind eased just enough for the sound of bells. A moment later, boots crunched on concrete. And Santa walked in. Red coat, white beard, cookie in one hand, half eaten. Crumbs fell onto his coat and the floor as he chewed. He didn't look impressed, but he didn't look angry exactly either. His eyes found me immediately.
Cole Keaton,
he said, serious now. My stomach dropped.
come here, boy.
I gulped and walked over. Santa reached into his coat and pulled out a thick book. The cover was worn smooth from use. He flipped through the pages without looking at them, then stopped. And there it was, my name, under the naughty list. He frowned at it for half a second, and then he took his pen and crossed it out. He looked back over at me, took a bite of a cookie, and winked. After that, things went fast. I asked Holly for her number before I left. She laughed at me, told me she didn't have one, and wrote something down on the back of a torn tag instead. Her Elfstagram. I still don't really know what to do with that. I didn't get any more money after the job. No bonus, no follow-up. When I got home, though, I opened my apartment door and stopped cold. There was a Christmas tree standing in the middle of my living room. Not a cheap one, not something rushed. It was tall and full and perfect. The branches thick and real, covered in ornaments that looked like they'd been collected over decades. Glass ones, hand-painted ones. Stuff that felt personal in a way I wasn't used to. Under it were gifts. A lot of them. 10 years worth, actually. Everything I remembered asking for as a kid. Stuff I'd forgotten I ever wanted until I saw it again. Toys, games, books. Things I'd learned early not to expect. I didn't open them all at once. I took my time. I'm way too old for most of it now, but I still played with it anyway. Don't tell anyone. A while later, I got another message. An invitation. Same week, same deal. The week of Christmas. They said I'd done good work last time. I haven't answered yet. Some nights, when it's snowing hard outside, I sit by my window and stare out into it. I think about sitting in that chair by the workshop doors, watching the storm tear across the ice. I remember Santa stepping back into his sleigh, brushing crumbs off his coat, calling the reindeer by name like in the stories. They shifted first, hooves scraping against the ice, harnesses tightening, breath pouring out of them in thick white clouds as they leaned forward, muscles bunching under their hides. And then they started to move, at a walk at first, slow, measured, bells chiming softly as the sleigh rolled behind them, then faster, a run, the runners rattling, the reins snapping once as Santa pulled them tight. The front of the sleigh lifted just an inch, and the whole thing rose off the ice. The reindeer pulled harder, legs stretching forward, hooves never quite touching the ground again. Snow kicked up beneath them and then fell away as the sleigh climbed higher and higher, cutting straight up into the storm. The